to go lower.
Yes.
Lower. One of the kind of news we're using to see.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to day 2 of the 32nd Africa Public Relations Now Virtual Conference. It's my pleasure to host you again today. My name is Nkiru Olumide Ojo. So we do have quite a packed day, so it's so important, that we start early. But I think first is to say, how are you doing? I hope you had a good rest of yesterday. If you joined us for the networking, I hope that you did manage to meet more than a few people. If you didn't, I hope that you take the opportunity that today provides to network. But right before we go straight into it, I would like you to just pop in the chat to say, and this is your response to how are you doing? On a scale of 1 to 5, just let me know how you're doing by saying 2, I'm okay, just okay. 3, I'm good. 4, I'm doing amazing. 5, I'm doing super, super, super well. So just pop that into the chat. It's a very full day. We do have lots and lots of discussions. So it's important, that we start early. So how are you doing? If you are doing great, pop it in the chat. 6, oh my goodness. Henry, we didn't say 5, so okay. But you are right, Henry. Number 6 is powerful. Number 6 is blessed. It's more powerful than doing okay. So I hear you, and I take the message. So excellent, excellent. Thank you. HM says, greetings from sunny Kigali. HM, I wish that I was in Kigali. It's quite cold here in Johannesburg. Excellent, lovely. Sunny, nice to see you. Lovely, lovely. Siabonga, I feel like you are in South Africa. Siabonga, are you in South Africa? Well, you can be from anywhere, really. You can be seated anywhere. But it's an amazing day, and I'm looking forward to it. Remember, I said to you yesterday that one of the things that COVID taught me, or one of the advantages that the pandemic brought for me, was that I could learn more effortlessly. And what that meant was that I wasn't always reading, I was, going to these webinars, going to the sessions virtually, and, I will just pick up, lots of knowledge. So I'm hoping that, you are looking forward to learning today. Yes, Yabonga is in South Africa, and I thought so. Patrick is in Blantyre. Oh, Malawi. Yes, the warm heart of Africa in the southern basin. So this is us this morning, and we do have a super packed day. I think first to let you know that the conference runs all the way to the afternoon. So what that means is we will be together until the afternoon. We will take a break and then we'll return, to the session. Someone is bringing us greetings from Uganda, and remember that we gave you a 1 to 5. Yes, someone is bringing me greetings from Abuja. We gave you a 1 to 5 pointer, and Henry took us all the way to 6. So we do have quite a full day, and we have conversations around the economic development of Africa, really important, to us. Because obviously we cannot have public relations in isolation. Public relation is right in the middle of how the economy is faring. We have a conversation on Africa and the force of public relations. That actually is a panel session. And I hope you are excited as I am. I always look forward to listening to Jordan Ritterbury every year because he then brings to us the trust barometer, so critical. Remember that is the biggest thing that we're trying to solve for, the issue of trust. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'm going to go right into the first session. Right, someone has just said, yes, Carol, I agree. I'm quite cold in Johannesburg as well. Greetings from Ghana. Thank you so much. Yesterday, Ghana said to me that, I had said to people, can you please return at West African time? And they said to me, Nigerian time is not West African time, kind of like a warning. So I'm well warned today, and I'm aware that Ghana is +2 GMT. I think Morocco is +1 GMT. And then obviously all of us in Southern Africa are in SAT. I'm not sure who I'm missing. The Kenyan time I'm so sure about is +2 above the SAT. Okay, so I'm not going to push my luck any further, and I'm just going to go straight into it. So hello from across the continent. So this morning, our first speaker is going to be speaking to us about the economic development in Africa and what the role of public relations is. Remember, I had said to us that public relations doesn't function or grow in isolation of the economy where we each function. So it's so important that we are aware of this particular development. Now our speaker is from East Africa. And just before I call him to the virtual stage, I'd like to remind us that it's so important, even though it is virtual, that we remember how to give warm welcomes. And remember how we do it. You can put your warm welcome in the chat box. You can turn on your video and clap. And I think you should turn on your video if you can, because what that does for me is it makes me feel less lonely. It makes me feel, less lonely. And believe it or not, it does get lonely, on this side. So very quickly, I would like to call on stage the person who is going to take us on this discourse, and his name is his name is David Birungi. And before David comes up, I'd like to just read his profile very quickly. He has got over 15 years experience in serving in different communication roles in electricity distribution business. Now in this place, he has built a strong capacity in framing regional energy stories. He's a regular contributor on energy issues discussed in Uganda through various media. He holds an MBA and a BA, Education and Economics major from the Makerere University. Now I remember how to pronounce this even better because our keynote speaker, guided us in the best way forward. Currently he's a stakeholder relations manager at Umeme Limited, where he's charged with the strategic management of political risk. Ladies and gentlemen, remember I told you to please turn on your camera and join me in giving David a really, really warm welcome. So welcome, David.
Thank you very
Excellent.
much, Nkiru. I hope I pronounced your name very well.
Nice.
I'm delighted to be here this afternoon from Kampala and morning in West Africa. I would like to thank all the people who have joined us in this conversation from around the world. It's always a pleasure for me to engage in professional conversations that I'm at improving the practice of public relations, which I have chosen to undertake. And of course, to learn from the very best in the room. Yesterday was a good day. Our keynote speaker set the ball rolling for everybody. And I was given a very simple task to do in 15 minutes to discuss the role of public relations in economic development for Africa. All the people, especially practicing PR professionals, probably have in their quick contacts, they have someone from the editors or producers of various media outlets across the continent, with the intention that these are your quick dial numbers when you need a story out, when you need a campaign to be covered, when you need to form a narrative. The reason we keep those numbers close by is because we want them to be a vehicle through which we can put our story out. But when you look at what happened in the past 1 year, the Western world, and we allowed it, made a projection that Africa was going to be battered by the COVID pandemic. We have suffered, it's true. But I'm comfortable to say that the projections were wrong, and they were made by various people, including the media, and we allowed them. So yesterday's reflection from the deputy, the president of the African Development Bank was, why are we allowing ourselves to be secondary in telling the African story? Why are we not forming our story? So I'll quickly go into my presentation, just a few slides, so that we reflect on the way the African story is being told. I'll quickly share my screen. I hope you can see it. Nkiru, can you confirm that people can see my screen?
Yes, we can. I think please just put it on slideshow so it fills out the screen. Correct.
That's clear?
Correct.
So I'm making this presentation on behalf of the Public Relations Association of Uganda, where I'm an active member and my president is in the room. Thank you, Stephen, for giving me an opportunity to talk about this. And we have about a 500 strong member association, and we believe that we're on the right course to ensuring that we professionalize the way we practice and inform the public. So my profile has been read, but most importantly, I write a blog where I express my opinions. You can check it out when you have time. When you look at economic development, that's a long-term vision that every country makes. There are certain characteristics I want to go into, but the nexus between economic development and public relations is the long-term nature of both disciplines. Those who are in economic management, macroeconomic management, they project over a long period of time. Those of us who are charged with building relationships, we know relationships are not one-night stands where you go in and out. You are aiming for the future, a longer-term outcome. You're investing every other time. So when you look at Africa's economic outlook from the AFD as projected for 2021, GDP is expected to rebound, having declined 2.1% because of COVID. I think most of the projections by the analysts in the Western world were way off the mark. There's an important aspect that comes through, that tourism-based economies, and I think these are many on the African continent, they are likely to grow near about 7%, and they had cut down about 11% because of the crippling lockdowns. I want to spend some time on that. The African integration that we are working towards achieving as different players in the African market cannot be achieved if we do not deal with issues of visas across countries. An African should be able to move. And I know there is a lot of conversation happening from our leaders, but as public relations people, it's a conversation we need not to get off the table. If most of the tourism-based economies are going to develop and they are going to rebound to levels where we want, at least as a vehicle to win ourselves from depending on foreign tourists, then we need to be able to discuss the bottleneck of African visas, African passports, because we are sure that once that is allowed, then you're going to have many people crossing and doing businesses. We cannot talk about integration if that bottleneck is not out of the way. So we should be leading conversations because the return on investing in that is a geometrical increase in the tourism potential of each country that is thriving on tourism. And then, of course, the other outlook is the fiscal indiscipline. I saw the African Development Bank address it as fiscal deficits, but I chose to highlight indiscipline because much of our maladministration is hidden in there. In the fiscal deficits, you cut your growth to measure. All the budget indiscipline that you can meet in any of the African countries where growth is used as the poster statistic is hidden under fiscal deficits. You want to spend more than you can actually correct, more than you can get from your productive activities, more than you're actually investing in your people. So the projection is that they are likely to grow from 10 to 15%. Ideally, this is where you find the corruption indexes that we talk about. So we should be able, in projecting this outlook to the world, what are we doing to reduce the fiscal indiscipline? Yesterday, there was a debate, and I subscribe the same. Debt is not necessarily bad. It is the prudence with which debt is managed that is important. And I think we need to be able, as we call our editors, as we call people who are actually out there talking on behalf of our countries, to be able to discuss the issue of indiscipline, fiscal indiscipline. We must be able to bring onto the table conversations about the cost of public administration. I won't name examples here, but wherever you are joining from, this is an area that should interest you, especially if we are going to reframe the way the African story of economic development is talked about. So I'm going to quickly look at the regions. If you look at West Africa, yes, they shrank by about 1.5%. The big bull, the Nigerian economy, which is the biggest on the African continent, shrank by about 3%, but is expected to grow. The region is expected to grow to about 3%. But if you exclude the COVID stories coming from the regions, what do we see in West Africa? The story that has caught on, that there are many other stories, I agree, but the French are leading in developing the joint counterterrorism efforts in West Africa. But is that the only story that can come out? When we call our editors in West Africa, in Lagos, in Abuja, in Accra, to pitch our stories, what stories are we pitching? Terrorism is going to be there for as long as injustice and inequality thrives on the African continent. So, yes, it is a problem, but is that the only story outside COVID? Is that the only story we can pitch? And I think the practitioners on the West African side of the continent, I use that as a reflection point, but you are not alone. Southern Africa saw the highest contraction because they were hit more, 7%, but they expected to grow by just half of what they contracted, 3%. But look at the story that is in Southern Africa. It is the insecurity in Mozambique, which is impacting hundreds of lives. It's the gun control laws in Southern Africa. We all know private security industry in Southern Africa, especially South Africa, Mozambique, rather Zimbabwe, is a growing industry. When you start seeing private security firms listing on the stock exchange, what does that tell you? That means people are securing what they think is there. So it's going to be a big story in Southern Africa, gun control. But is that the only story, the good story that can actually eclipse the gun control laws that are being reviewed in Southern Africa? It has started from South Africa. We're going to see it in other countries. And we are seeing a resource-based war in Mozambique. Eastern Africa, most resilient, shrunk by just 0.7%, but expected to grow by 3%. But the Eastern Africa region is more interesting. They lead stories, constitutional reforms in Kenya, new governments in Uganda, Tanzania, and of course the war in Ethiopia. Those are the stories we have allowed to grow. But take a look at the Ethiopian example. The Ethiopian example, they have the dam that is supposed to actually power the East African power pool and power the Southern African power pool. Could that have been the source of the war? That's a discussion for another day. But I believe that the story from Eastern Africa could change from what we are seeing, the constitutional reforms, the tug of war in Kenya, the new governments in Uganda and Tanzania. What's the promise? The practitioners in Tanzania and Uganda, what's the promise of these new governments that have come in place? Well, I put new in quotes because the Ugandan one may not necessarily be new, and they happen to be Ugandan. Central Africa, primary resources, mining, the resumption of extractive industries at the backdrop of stable security situations. Those are the dominant stories, but there's more. What if we explored the tourism potential of Central Africa? What if we put those stories, the positive stories, across? When you come to North Africa, the peace efforts in the rest of Middle East, they are going to continue. But it was Egypt that salvaged the performance by just 3.6%. And we know that is because the world opened and the oil sales have resumed. And therefore, the trade is improving. Yes, Africa is rebounding, but for whom? It's a big question we need to start thinking about as PR professionals. When that guy, his name is called Professor Simon Kuznets, he refined the gross domestic product as a measure of economic, of the size of the economies. He'd never mentioned that there's going to be a measure of our well-being. But the economists, including the one who was here yesterday and including myself, I spent some considerable time in economics class, we keep putting GDP as a poster metric. GDP was refined by Professor Simon, respectfully, to help governments plan for war. Look at the period 1919-1930, to design policies to redeem the economic depressions that were caused by war. Economic activity is cyclic. So whether the economy is protecting public good, the P in PR is public, and whether we're actually communicating that public good properly is not captured by GDP. So when we talk about GDP growth, yes, Africa is rebounding. Yes, we want to grow, but for whom? In many conversations where you go to, I run a small poll, I've spoken to people, focus group discussions. These are the top that come, the concerns, and I'm happy that there's the Edelman Trust survey that we are going to look at, but those come top two, health and education. When everybody was scared of dying, health became important. The unintended consequence that we started having more ICU beds because COVID came. More pupils on African continent have actually accessed for the first time their education online. But can we bring on more? Because many more will fall off if we do not spend time in that area. So are we framing stories about health, about education in the right way that should be framed? Or all we are saying is that the African continent people are not learning and their culture is aged and all that. But there's an opportunity in that area, as we shall see. In some countries like Bhutan, they have opted for gross national happiness. Would you rather be with a good GDP, but your people are unhappy? That's an image of Ohod Al-Rohum. That's the Minister for Happiness for UAE. They've considered that in order for us to have meaningful conversation about the welfare of our people, we need to look at how happy they are. Are they pleased with what we are doing, or we're actually imposing it on them? I strongly believe that the next wars that are going to come, or social strife, is going to come from people who recognize inequality and injustice rather than those people who are poor. So let's look at what happened from the countries that actually returned money to the Sub-Saharan Conference, Sub-Saharan Africa region. Nigeria having gotten about 21 billion, nearly half of what was remitted from other countries, mainly from UAE. So when our people are boarding to go and work as the maids, as porters in UAE, and they are remitting all this money, how are we framing this story? Are they happy? If we did a survey on the families and those who are actually doing the menial work in UAE, is that opportunity difficult to create on the African continent? If the UAE is appointing a minister for happiness, those who are remitting this money, are they happy? I think for me, that's where we should have the conversation. Yes, the remittances are coming in, majority of them from the Gulf countries, and that's how they were shared in 2020. But did they deliver the happiness that people want? I didn't create that picture, and I apologize for that. I should have put the source. But if you look at public good and private equity, and private good, on one hand, you have Africans, and I think these stories, we can't deny them, but they're also good stories. Look at the venture capital activity that happened in Africa. Number of deals that were sealed, and the billions that actually came with those deals. Yes, if we were seeing these deals in Africa, why are people running away? We should be able to frame these stories. Is it a mismatch between information about these deals that were being sealed as private, as venture capital coming into Africa, and then our people are running away from that venture capital? Could we have bridged the gap between what they are running away from and what actually is coming into the African continent? I think we have an opportunity to do that. I also managed to pick the African Union Commission's view on some of these jobs in the Middle East or Gulf countries. I don't know whichever way you dress them up, but in my view, you can check out that view of the African Union Commission. I believe we can frame it better. They are not just migrant workers. I don't want to use the word, but you know the word. That opportunity can be created here, and it's our job to assist the African Union Commission. The next speaker is coming to me, to us from the African Union Commission, to be able to reframe the way that migrant labor is being handled. And finally, it's our job to assist society to make choices. When COVID landed, governments had a difficult job to do. Do you save lives? Do you save livelihoods? And I added dignified livelihoods because at the end of the day, economic development does not make sense if it does not restore dignity. Some of you have worked on SDG goals. Goal number 8 is about dignified jobs. Yes, we are working with government to ensure that we change behavior and fight the COVID pandemic, but we must be able to make a balance, and that balance is informed by the campaigns we run out there. Make sure that the society has to make a choice between saving lives and saving dignified livelihoods. not just any livelihoods. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of my presentation. I wish to end here and thank you for the participation. Over to you, administration.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David, for that valuable presentation. I think that I would hold on to my questions, only because we already do have one or two questions or comments. But in the meantime, I think also to just say warm hello to Mr. Stephen Nwanga, the president of the PRAU from Uganda. So very quickly, Dr. Abraham Olushola has a question, and he says, insecurity is the bane in the growth of tourism. How do we harness the synergy in joint military or security operations? If you do have a question that you haven't popped into the chat and you would like to raise your hand, right, I see a hand. I'm going to come straight to you in a bit. So David, do you want to respond to this very quickly? And I will go to ask Patrick to respond. So this was a question just simply asking you, how do you think we deal the issue of insecurity with regards to tourism? I think the asker is also inferring that a lot of economies depend, on tourism. I know that a few countries, more than a few countries in Southern and Eastern Africa depend on tourism. So this is perhaps where he's coming from with that sort of question. So over to you, David.
Thank you very much. My perception of insecurity across the African continent is a pile up of years of injustice. And our relationship as PR people, the R is relationships. You don't build relationships in a short time. If over a long period of time, you have seen misrule, and all we have done is to change the way perceive long stay regimes on the African continent, then you are breeding a source of insecurity. So do we want to continue that or stop now? We cannot stop the insecurity that has happened, but we have a good chance now to have conversations about economic justice, because you cannot have the benefits of economic development in a short time. And therefore, the failures of the governors of macroeconomic policies of African countries will also come to hit us. So we can pause now and say, let us begin, so that in the next 20 or so years, we have minimized the risk of insecurity that comes as a result of a perception of.
I think we've lost you. I think that your internet is buffering. It's buffering. Okay, all right. I think, look, Patrick had a question for you. Look, I think just based on our timing, what I will do is ask that that question is taking offline. Patrick, sincere apologies. May you kindly please just pop the question into the chat so we can go right on to the next speaker. We do have a packed morning, and it's so important that we run ahead. So apologies again, Patrick. Please pop your message in. Secretariat, may you please, isolate the message and send it straight to Patrick. You can private chat him or send it as an email so that he's able to respond on a one-on-one basis. Look, so ladies and gentlemen, that was a presentation, if you're just joining us, from David Burungi, Stakeholder Relations Manager at Umeme Limited in Ghana. And he was speaking to us about economic development in Africa and what our role is as practitioners. So we're going right on to the next presentation, and it is from the Senior Communication Advisor to the United Kingdom's Government Communication Service, Kerry Sheehan. Kerry would be speaking to us on how public relations across Africa can ensure that their practice is intelligent to support the technological innovation drive, rewriting the story of the continent and its vast potential. So Kerry, I see you already are here, but I'll ask that you just give me a few minutes to read out your profile. So Kerry is an award-winning chartered public relations practitioner. She has extensive experience directing marketing and communications functions in agency and in in-house businesses for brands, as in government as well. She's got over 15 years experience in government, technology, B2C, B2B sectors. She has proven success in implementing new and emerging technologies and AI strategies across businesses. She's a member of the International Data Foundation and is the first PR in the world to graduate from the Dame Wendy's Hall's World Wide Web Fundamentals of Data, AI, and Machine Learning. So I think this is really going to be interesting. She's a founder of Accelerate Communications and Accelerate AI, and is currently supporting a variety of leading organizations with innovation transformation in their operations and public relations. I always find it so interesting when we find someone who can very easily integrate business and PR. And I think more so when she's using AI and a couple of other tools she'll speak to us about. So ladies and gentlemen, may we please give Kerry a warm virtual welcome as she takes the stage. Hello, Kerry, nice to see you, welcome.
Hi everybody, and a warm hello from London. A bit grey and drizzly here today, so of course it would have been lovely to meet you all in person. So what I'm going to do, we'll just have a bit of a conversation. So just throw any questions at me. We are up against time today, so if there is anything you'd like to ask afterwards, if you think I may know, or if I don't know, we'll go and find someone else that can help. So if we can't get to everything here today, I'm happy to have a chat afterwards. So I'll just share my screen with you quickly, and hopefully you can see that. So I just wanted to have a quick conversation really about sort of why we have to be, as public relations practitioners, leapfrog innovators. Now it's probably a term you've never heard of before, but it's how do we now shift from just being messengers as public relations practitioners, just building those relationships to really sort of being more intelligent public relations practitioners. And the reason for that is, we really have to be at the forefront of supporting the technological innovation drive, which is really going to support, Africa now, not only as it recovers from COVID-19, but it was already happening anyway. So just before we sort of start, I just thought I'd show this with you. This was the last time that I was in Africa, the end of 2019 in Mombasa, Kenya. Some colleagues there that you probably recognise, Sarah from PRAU and dear Victor from PRISA. And wow, what a world that we all kind of stepped back into as we headed into 2020. If only we'd knew what as PR practitioners we were coming into. So why as PR practitioners do we now need to be at the forefront of really understanding data, having data skills, being trusted to interrogate statistical data, but more importantly, really understanding new and developing technologies? Well, that's because, lots of businesses across Africa, some countries are further ahead than others, are now really looking to technology as part of their diversification going forwards. I mean, as it says here, 1.3 billion people across Africa already transacting digitally, mostly by mobile devices. That's against the context of there is still work to do to enable everyone to have mobile devices. The internet isn't secure in all regions and communities. So we have to obviously have a digital first approach, but with a premise of leave nobody behind. So we do know the tech ecosystem, is really one way to begin to power Africa's growth. We've seen it accelerated through COVID-19, and I'll talk you through some examples at the moment. And it's kind of similar to what we saw perhaps as America's growth, going back a few decades. Africa's now in the same position. And actually Africa's in a better position now than America and the EU, European countries, and I'll pick up on that shortly as well. And one of the biggest reasons, excuse me, for that is you don't seem to have the legacy systems, the tech legacy systems, the horrible old tech systems that have become very quickly out of date that we now have to rebuild or build on. Lots of countries across Africa, lots of businesses, brands, organisations can really start building what's needed from scratch. So how are they going to do that? Basically, as a public relations practitioner, we're not asking you to have, the technical skills to build these platforms and solutions. If you do, that's wonderful. But how are we going to best communicate those? How are we going to best hold organisations to account on who gets to use these mobile systems, who gets to use these devices, who is perhaps prioritised on decision making from data, who is perhaps marginalised? Well, it's down to us as public relations practitioners, solution-led leaders in the C-suite, or if we have a voice in the C-suite, to really hold organisations to account on this. And the flip side is, we have the absolute privilege of being able to communicate on this, build the relationships, pave the way for the right conditions for people to use, uptake, deploy, and really, really benefit. So the potential really is accelerated. It is relying on the rapid speed of mobile digital technology now, and emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence. And that will really help all of the regions leapfrog ahead in their economic development. So what a time to be a public relations practitioner and really be at the forefront of that. And that's whether you've got a real good understanding of all of these things or not. I strongly recommend that you start to see what's happening out there and really put yourself in the best position you can. So what we're already seeing across the world, but particularly in sort of Africa, and I'll talk through some examples shortly. The world is being, as it says here, characterised by enhanced connectivity. There is the drive, even in those regions and communities that unfortunately aren't still connected, or they do have connection, but it's not consistent, it's not reliable. We always have to remember those people, leave nobody behind in a digital first approach. But where we've got data, it's valuable, and Africa has this absolute unique opportunity to really start to leverage that now, as I'll talk through shortly. And as I've said, public relations practitioners have to drive this forward. We have to understand it now. We have to be at the forefront. What we already saw pre-COVID-19 across lots of different continents, nations and regions was that there were shifting landscapes in public relations anyway, and the skill sets required. But really importantly, in behaviours of how consumers, how people that interact with services, whether they're public or private, wanted to do business. These organisations were already looking to see how they could work smarter, faster. The same goes for public relations practitioners now. So if we think about, the public relations landscape shifting at pace, what was appropriate pre-COVID may not be appropriate now. We really have to start to assess, where the landscapes do lie. And that is, with the big rally call, we all need to upskill to remain relevant now. We need to be data-led communicators. We need to be technological savvy communicators, in addition to having foundational skills in, digital means and methods. We really need to be at the fore now. And one of these is artificial intelligence, which you all will have heard of, in recent years across other economies across the world, looking at the UK, Europe and America, it's been positioned as one of, the biggest commercial opportunities for global economies. And that isn't just, big corporates moving in. You've all heard of, Vodafone or Vodacom, for example, an AI-led business, the way they communicate with people, the way they sell services to people, but it's being built in many nations across Africa as we currently speak. And the amount of startup organisations that I've spoken to in the past months from various nations in Africa is absolutely incredible. So we need to understand these skills to be able to best support ethical developments, best support ethical deployments, and so forth. Sorry, just bear with me a second. So there's many optimistic reasons for this. We do know that Africa's is home to some of the youngest populations in the world. They want to communicate, they want to do business, they want to know things via digital means. If they don't have devices themselves, the likelihood is they know somebody that does, and they may share them, and so forth. But ultimately, everything is becoming increasingly mobile enabled, and the pandemic has just accelerated that. And over the next 3 decades, we do know that it will be a major consumption market. So what happens with that? We've got an emerging digital ecosystem. Multipliers of that will happen when smartphones become more accessible, ways of doing businesses, human demands, human behaviours, And that will create, you know, better networks, enhanced networks, more stable networks, but also job creating resources, and hopefully that financial inclusion as we get going forward, because that's really, really important. So again, you know, another sort of, you know, rally call: innovation, diversification, inclusion. They are the linkages that are key to Africa's development. How is that going to happen? Well, that's going to be by fostering these technologies. And also, this is why public relations practitioners need to not only foster their own understanding in these sectors, they absolutely have to be at the forefront, again, advising clients, businesses, public sector organisations, governments, you know, small startups and so forth in all of these areas. So, I mean, as it says there, as I've said a couple of times before, you know, the best way to untap the opportunities for growth here is for public relations practitioners to not only be the messengers anymore, we have to be solutions-led leaders, coming up with ideas to push businesses forward, to push governments forward and so forth, against the context of how people's behaviours are changing towards digital interactions, but also in their behaviour expectations of how organisations, businesses and brands give them their information, updates and so forth. And again, what you'll see here, you know, digital is now everyone's business. You know, we've all moved into a space where, you know, most of us do digital communications, but we are moving now a big step beyond that to, you know, really honing in on those data skills. So digital evolution, momentum, mobile money has emerged, you know, across many nations across Africa because of the pandemic. And as it says there, you know, you've got things like jobs, institutional drivers, you know, foundational digital potential of countries and so forth. So with many nations across, you know, Africa now looking, how are they going to sort of leapfrog, I guess, the competition in a sense to aid economic development? That is a marvellous, absolute marvellous opportunity for public relations practitioners. And that is our space. And I do sometimes fear if we don't have the skills, the understanding ourselves, how can we really support this to happen the best it can be, and so forth. Here's just some examples of, you know, why innovation, you know, is PR's business. And it just starts to bring to life some of the accelerated tech growth across many nations in Africa. If you look at South Africa, already known as a leader out there, you know, emerging technologies, biometric data, facial recognition, you've all heard of that. You know, some policing authorities use it, immigration authorities sometimes use it, has its criticisms, of course. You only have to look at the news and, you know, a day doesn't go by when sometimes facial recognition is in the news. And again, that is possibly because a public relations practitioner wasn't holding the people that were building these systems and the people that were saying, yes, they're good to go live on those ethical considerations. So we really have to make sure that that links back to reputation, trust, and so forth. So again, you can start to see we're moving into a different area here. And obviously South Africa, well known for payment cards, for social security, also very good AI-enabled drones that are used in the mining sectors, for example. Nairobi, Kenya, has got something known as the Silicon Savannah. I've been talking to some people there, growing tech ecosystems, really exciting things coming out of there. You know, Nigeria, got a very good startup investment scene and destination. I mean, as it says there, $95 million in deals, according to the Nigerian government, came from, you know, innovative ways of building tech solutions, innovative ways of doing customer services, innovative ways of engaging with people out there. So that's definitely one to watch. In Lagos, Yabacon Valley, again, you know, similar to what's happening in, you know, Nairobi in Kenya. Egypt, you know, fast growing digital technology sector. I believe it's the second fastest in Africa currently, if the latest statistics are correct. Very good at software development technology, creative elements as well. Again, that leaps into our role. Rwanda is also moving itself into a digital hub. You know, I understand the government now has a government to citizen e-portal where it puts updates, news, communicates with people, and that's all backed by data. And it will move to a place of where, you know, personalised communication to its citizens based on sign-up preferences. So again, we need to be at the forefront of that to make sure that not only is that technology right, but we are getting the right message to the right people at the right time, and so forth. And Rwanda is also setting about on a programme for improved digital skills, not only for its workers, but for its citizens, as are many countries throughout the world. Ethiopia, Sheba Valley, I'm yet to find out more about that, but that sounds really, really exciting. Obviously, across Africa, there's a focus on ag-tech or agri-tech, as we know it, agricultural technologies, led by data, artificial intelligence. Again, how best do we engage on those? How best do we, put messages out about those? How best, do we make sure the right communication is going out and so forth about the benefits, and etc. And again, that helps to build economies, and also at some point economies of scale and so forth. And we're even starting to see advanced technologies now, such as blockchain, being used across various African nations, in the supply of, everything and anything, even down to trading coffee beans, which, does make a lot of, the economic incomings for the nation and for the region. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour just to say that it's here, it's not coming. So as PR practitioners, again, how does this relate back to us? Well, automation AI is changing the PR and communications landscape. It has been for a long time now. We do know that in our own roles, AI makes conversations and connections more powerful. And again, that's by using AI-enabled tools in our roles to really segment our audiences, to pick up on sentiment data, pick up on intention, and so forth. We can make smarter decisions faster, so we are providing more impact. Spot hot trends and topics. Many of us do that already through sort of sentiment analysis on social media channels, but it goes wider than that now. And ultimately, the whole data remit, smart analytics and connected intelligence. And the demands on us are growing now, so we just have to show our productivity and value worth to business, not just waiting to be told what to communicate anymore, but really moving into that solutions-led space, and supporting businesses and organisations to go forward with their technological evolution, or it could be revolution. I like to say evolution, but some it will be revolution. So just very quickly, I'll just kind of a bit of a reassurance actually on the fact that you probably are using some of these things in your own roles and in your advisory roles, or you will be aware of them. So the number one here to really start to get to grips with is data. Technologies like artificial intelligence run on data. That's the main thing there. We do know data skills are lacking in the public relations industries across the world. That is because technically we were creative people. It wasn't our area to learn, but we have to be trusted now to interrogate statistical data, and we have to be data-led communicators now. There's nothing more powerful than going out with data. There's nothing more powerful than having the confidence to actually share your data via an open source mechanism. But to do that, you have to be aware of the counter challenges to data and so forth. So that is our space. And unfortunately, we do know from some of our work on the artificial intelligence in public relations panel globally, those that perhaps won't upskill into data at some point, wherever your country, nation, region is on its upskilling journey as a whole, will get left unfortunately behind as the skill sets change. So data for insights, social listening tools aided by artificial intelligence, automated content. We're seeing automated content which is led by artificial intelligence, led by data, is getting better. So we may get to a point where communicators, public relations practitioners may just be content curators. We won't need to copyright anymore. We won't need to write media releases anymore. We may just need to be in charge of the data that's fed in and look at the overall product to have sign off for it to go out. So when that happens, what are we going to do in our own roles? Well, we should have diversified into being that solutions-led leader by then, but that is something to be aware of. The products on the market, they're getting better day by day, and we do know that there are some PR functions out there that are using this in their operations, albeit small scale at the moment, but that will happen going forward. And then just to pick up on some of the reasons, why we should all upskill into these areas, the context of, the technological evolution is happening out there. For some areas, it's revolution, and it's been accelerated because of the pandemic. Communicators we now have to know natural language processing, again, an area of artificial intelligence led by data, and that is the automated content. We're seeing artificial intelligence being in charge of campaign management and deployment. We use this within the UK Government Communications Service, and it works really well. Chatbots, virtual humans, if you're at an organisation, business or brand, startup, that is thinking about using one of these, or a government department or a government agency, it's to the public relations practitioner to really ensure that tone of voice is on message, the brand carries through, you are talking to people in the way that your organisation wants to be known, and so forth. And then we're also moving to a place of voice first, with the explosion of mobile devices now, and the uptake increasing, voice to tech and tech to voice is going to be huge, and most people will just search for news, search for updates through voice now. So that's another reason we need to upskill. So just really quickly, because I know we're coming up against time here, it's a really unique opportunity for public relations practitioners across Africa to not only pave the way on some of this, but punch above your weight, I would say, and look to not only sort of America and Europe, which are potentially a bit ahead, but the issue we have is we have all the legacy systems. Africa, they don't have those legacy systems, so that can actually put you in the forefront, and I think that we will see Africa overtake those nations, those regions and those countries in the future. But also by understanding these technologies, you can really start to help inclusion, economic issues, and so forth. So I just kind of rattle to the end, otherwise I'll get told off for running over. We might not have any time for questions. This is all really with the premise that innovation is crucial to your long-term success as a public relations practitioner communicator. It is all about business now. And as it says here, it's time to ask ourselves some very tough questions on our strategic communicators and marketeers, on our advisory role, on all things technological developments, all things mobile developments, but really importantly, data, automation and AI, whether that's built in-house or whether that's brought in from outside. And most of all, because it's a reputation risk, it's a trust risk. We need to be ethical, we need to be in that ethical guardian space now. So just to wrap up here, the question then is not if AI can become a driver for Africa's development, but just how quickly it will be rolled out across corporations, governments, and importantly, led and supported by upskilled PR innovators.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kerry. I mean, I just thought we would do ourselves more than a bit of disservice if we didn't make room for at least 2 questions. So not sure if people want to put their hands up. I'm going to look very quickly into the chat to see what questions have come through. I feel like Patrick's question was for the last session. Yeah, I think so, because yes, that was for the last. Patrick's comment is still about Zambia. So there's one question, which is, what are the next steps in implementing these innovations, especially using AI? So maybe if I can leaning on that question is just saying, how can we operationalize this? How can we bring this down to day to day? What are the next, basic day-to-day next steps we need to take? And ladies and gentlemen, if you do have a question, please put your hands up. I'll take it really quickly and apologize to the next people because we are suddenly running late.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. I'll just quickly answer that. It's all about knowing data, and it's all about, because artificial intelligence can only run on data. It is human-led. Put rubbish data in, you're going to get rubbish out, and that is the biggest reputation risk and threats that we will see to organizations, businesses and brands out there. So I would really start to kind of upskill into those areas, and you can do that through various methods. There's lots of videos on YouTube for free. I wouldn't advocate paying for anything at this stage. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, I'm happy to provide a bit of a list, because I know we are up against time. But I'd also sort of really start to spend time with tech developers, see what they're working on, see what the direction of travel is. Does your government have, an innovation lead, a tech lead, for example? You know, where are the pockets of innovation out there that potentially may come to market, or they're already in market and they may be upscaled in the future? It doesn't have to be in your country, it could be in neighbouring countries, or it could be elsewhere. But yeah, definitely have a look.
Look, Kerry, can I just please ask that you still stay through with us, you know, through the conference? And ladies and gentlemen, may I ask that you please pop your questions in the chat box? We will collect those questions and pass it to her. And perhaps what we can do, if we do have, you know, any outstanding questions, we can respond to them just when we're going for break time. I think this is only fair, so we are respectful of other people's time. But otherwise, thank you so much, Kerry.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate it, and thank you for the nod.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we are running, you know, against time, and we do have one presentation that should be quick. And this is a special feature, you know, by the Africa Public Relations Association's president and National Association presidents in Africa. And I know that the association presidents who are here are obviously our president, Mr. Yemi Kusoya, and then Stephen Nwamga from Uganda, and Loth Makuza from Tanzania. If you are here, may I please ask that you very urgently take the virtual stage, because it feels to me like we are keeping our next speaker waiting. Okay, do we have the APRA's president and president of the association? Excellent, lovely, good to, yes, good to see you. May I please have Stephen Nwamga? I saw Stephen earlier, and Loth Makuza. I think I've seen Loth today. Cool, there you are. Gentlemen, thank you so much. May I please ask that you please give me back 5 minutes so that we're respectful of the next speaker's time. Thank you.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here.
Nice, so
Okay,
over to you now. I'll hand over to you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you very much, Shekere, and thank you for all the speakers and all those who have been on today. I specifically asked for this session, which is titled Africa and the Force of PR, and to see how we can have a very brief discussion around the things, the challenges and the solutions for PR. So we're providing solutions to many of our clients' needs, but we ourselves need those solutions. So one of the things that I often say is that PR needs PR. It's a case of physician, heal thyself. We're good at doing this for our clients, for our principals, but somehow or the other we haven't done it for ourselves. So the topic is Africa and the force of PR. And the first question you asked me is that, does PR actually have force? Force, from the Wikipedia definition, says it's strength or energy as an attribute of physical action or movement. So do we have a force in PR in Africa, in the sense that how much is our PR valued? And I'm going to throw this open to the presidents of the national associations here. Quite a number of questions that I've listed. What are the challenges of PR on the continent? Why is PR not well valued on this continent or appreciated on the continent? Are we satisfied with the level of respect that we command? What is our proposition value as PR practitioners on the continent? What must we do to position PR in Africa? In a nutshell, somebody has been stealing our dinner. Who are those people who have been stealing our dinner? Because nowadays you hear, oh, we're this. Let me take in my own market that I operate. Some people tell you, oh, we're event planners. We are not PR practitioners. We are digital strategists. We are not PR practitioners. We are media publicists. We are not PR practitioners. So in my own perception, it's like a big pie. And people have come and they're taking pieces of that pie until we are left with something very small. So what are the things? What can we do? How competitive is our PR practice, even on the continent? Are we satisfied with the bouquet of services we're offering, or we're stuck in a time machine that is still in the past? And what are the numerous solutions? What are the solutions to the numerous challenges that we face? I'm going to start with you, Lot, and maybe you can help us throw light on some of these issues that I've raised. Lot, are you with us? Lot, are you with us? All right, Stephen, do you want to go?
Maybe buffering, yes.
Yes, Stephen, do you want to take a shot at some of the issues that I have raised? Welcome on board, by the way, both of you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. It's afternoon in Uganda. It's actually 13:03 hours. Thank you, moderator Nkiru. You've done a wonderful job. This is my first time to participate in an APRA conference, and I am really humbled and grateful, that I've been able to have a chance to speak something in this conference. Yes, Mr. President, you're talking about challenges and are we really important as PR practitioners on the continent? I'll first take a participant through the history, on the African scene. PR started with it's a traditional practice, it started with the kingdoms, in the past, even before colonialism, the king would not speak to subjects directly, he would go through a spokesperson of some sort. And that made the spokesperson a very powerful person in the kingdom because he spoke for the king. And we've carried on from there up to where we are as PR practitioners. Yes, are we relevant? Yes, we are relevant to society in Africa. You know that PR is about exchange of information. PR is about managing communication. PR is about planning communication. PR is about dissemination of information. And you know that Africa needs these services, for purposes of integration. Integration is very important. Look at, I'll give you the example of the African regional blocks like ECOWAS. Maybe let me start with the African Union itself. You know that African Union really needs information, really needs the PR services because it is through the PR that the union will be able to, to move its agenda, among its African people and African governments and so on. And then, of course, when you come to regional blocks like ECOWAS, we have EAC, East African Community. In East Africa, we have SADC. These regional blocks are important to people. But you know that many people do not understand, or some people do not understand why they exist. And so you see that the PR service there is very pertinent, to integrate activities of those regional blocks, to bring them nearer to the people in Africa. And yes, of course, you know that economic integration is important in Africa, on the African continent. The president of ADB yesterday was talking about, Africa having to use PR to tell the positive story. And there are countries in Africa that are really doing very well economically. And that information should be shared with the rest of the African peoples. And the PR element in that is very key, very, very key, because that's the only way we can now have that information shared. Political integration, you look at now, for example, East African Community, I'll give that as an example. We are looking at advancing, political integration in East Africa. and you cannot
Okay.
undermine.
Stephen, sorry to break into your thoughts. Let me try and guide you. Are you satisfied with the level of PR practice in your markets?
Yeah, yes. Now, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. That's where I was going. I was trying to give examples, that require, PR. Yes. Am I satisfied with the PR practice, wherever I am in Africa? I would like to say that PR is playing a key role in a number of aspects. And as I said, the PR services, the PR practitioners are doing well despite the challenges. And may you kindly allow me talk about the challenges, that we face.
Yeah,
and
that's
I think
what I would like us to say. Let's focus on what are the challenges. What I have not back now, so I'm going to. So can you do this in a minute so that we can also?
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, the challenges I think are across Africa. They are the same. There are misconceptions about PR. Many people think that we are mere spokespersons. Yet, make changes to society, we make changes to we help people change lives. We help organizations, position themselves. We help organizations.
So are you happy?
Do business and so on. And also talking about countries and governments. Of course, we help governments to relate with other governments. So that misconception is a big challenge, and I think it is a common challenge across Africa. The misconception. Then, of course, there are issues of when you go to organizations, because of the misconceptions, you realize that a number of our colleagues, PR managers, face issues of having to plan PR activities, and their budgets having to be accepted or adopted, because there is that misconception about the practice of PR. You find that a number of practitioners have challenges having to, to have their budgets accepted by their managers and their CEOs and so that they are able to.
Sorry, because of time.
Yes.
Sorry, Stephen. So we have a budget issue.
Yes.
All right. Do we have Love back on now? Do we have Love back on? Love, if you're on, we just want to ask you to pitch in to what is being said here. The continent. What is the challenge for us? Why is that happening? So perhaps you can answer me.
Yes,
why
thank you, Mr.
is PR not having the kind of recognition it ought to? You find out that on many making tables, you've got the accountants, you've got the finance people, you've got the legal people, and so on and so forth. But somehow or the other is when they are taking those decisions, they then tell us to go and communicate their decisions. Why is that?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think why that is happening is as practitioners, we've not been able to earn a place in the boardrooms, where those decisions are made. We have a challenge of accessing boardroom, being part of the boardroom. Organizations go to the boardroom, make policies or make policy changes, and they will expect the PR practitioner to communicate those policy changes or to communicate a new policy. Yet, the PR practitioner has not been part and parcel of the decision-making meeting. So we have.
May I ask you to please hold your thoughts, because I've got Love. I've seen Nkiru and she's already nodding to me. She's going to tell us to go up very soon. Love, did you hear my opening statements?
I am experiencing technological challenge. Network challenge. Can you repeat, Mr. President, so that I can?
Are you satisfied with the practice of public relations in your market? What are the challenges and what solutions do you think we can prefer?
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, in case of Tanzania, we are somehow satisfied with the practice of public relations profession. But the main problem is most of the public relations practitioners in different departments and institutions and the companies, especially in the government, are not professional. Those, we call them public relations practitioners, their main route is journalism. That is the main problem that we are facing. You can find someone is a merely journalist, but his or her aim is to become a public relations practitioners. Because as we know that we have to be strategic in executing our duties. How can you be in a very strategic way while your mentality is only to report? Let me say this, on the government office some days ago, the public relations department office. So how can you make this public relations practitioner in a very strategic way while the one who headed the office is a lawyer? So we have HRs are practicing public relations. We have legal officers who are practicing public relations. So that is the main problem. So though we are satisfied, we are being somehow satisfied, but not really. That's why the role of Public Relations Society of Tanzania has been to teach, to bring awareness through the government and even private sector, so that we can tell who has to execute public relations roles in their institutions and the companies. That's what I can say.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so let me just quickly add, there are questions here. I see Ike Neliaku. Can you please unmute him so that he can, I'm going to unmute him myself. All right. Ike, can you speak? Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This is very, very key, very relevant. I would like to say that one of the basic things I have observed about PR practice in Africa, particularly in my country, is the absence of relevance. And I believe that's the point that our friend from Tanzania is trying to convey. If you have not made yourself to be relevant, government is not going to recognize you. Corporate organizations will not recognize you. We have not been led by people who are passionate and know what to do about our profession. So long as this is not done, the average politician or someone in governance see media very well. He knows that media is relevant to his survival, both in office and out of office. So the likelihood is to defer to the media person. But PR is a superior calling to media, because we give the message the way it should go and make the right impact. But we have not been able to tell the governance person or the corporate person or the government person that you are missing, because getting a PR person is like getting two in one. You get somebody who understands the dynamics of media deployment and knows exactly how to deploy it to get the best out of it. So we are supposed to sit at the top, whereas media people are supposed to sit below us. But in a situation where we have not been able to demonstrate relevance, recognition has taken its flight from us. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Sarah, can you share your experience in your market? Sarah?
Hello, President. Hello, President. Thank you for providing leadership Regards from Kampala, Uganda. My experience here, and I would like to say it's not cool one bit to watch peer practitioners carry branding material during events, settling for just issuing press releases, empty roles, take photographs. We have decided to settle for this. We need to show our workplaces, wherever we are, that we can provide leadership at a strategic level, that we can contribute to the bottom line of organizations, to strategic growth. But just like you have done, President, to go beyond our little brands and contribute to branding of our countries, to the growth of PR nationally. And that is the only way PR will be respected in Africa. And I have good that Nancy has raised the issue of the brown envelope. I think that this issue between journalists and PR practitioners has been promoted by both professions. The decadence has been promoted by both of us. It takes two to tango. If we do not write stories that can earn media, we then take to other routes of the brown envelope. So for me, I would like to say that we need to start by contributing to strategic thought leadership. And I think this conference by APRA, I'm extremely very happy that we have gone for the bigger picture, to contribution to economic integration, growth of Africa business. And I will be following from now. I commend you, President. I commend you, dear colleagues. A shout out to Lowe's, Makuza, my President Stephen, and all of you. And of course, Nkiru, who is a very great moderator. I'm very, very excited that for once we are breathing some fresh air. We are talking, not just building narratives, because if you say, our countries are simply PR-led, but we don't do that on internally, Africans are not happy, then it is going to be very, very counterproductive. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Mr.
Nkiru,
President,
can I just squeeze one more person? I crave your indulgence, and I'm out of here. I see Nkechi Alibalogun's hand up. She'd like to make a condition. Just like, please make it as succinct as possible. Otherwise, Nkiru is going to drive you, I, Dr. Neliaku, and everybody from this platform.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I'm coming in to make my comment. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry I'm coming in to make a comment very late. I have been following the discussion and I want to commend you, Mr. President. I think this is the best discussion so far. Somebody said something. It is the role of public relations to assist our stakeholders, our publics, to make the right decisions. And I totally agree with what Dr. Ike Neliaku said. Until public relations practitioners are able to take charge, media will continue to play the first role. And this is very unfortunate because we actually are the one, it looks like we don't even go back to study the definition of public relations. There are so many things that we should be in the front burner doing that we leave journalists to be doing. And then at the end of the day, we blame journalists. Until we are able to take charge to actually understand the role we are supposed to play in guiding our publics to make the right decisions, we'll continue to complain. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so on that final note, I hand over to you, Nkiru. My final word is that many of us forget about the counseling part of our profession. We're eager to write press releases. We're eager to organize events and all of that. But public relations is a lot about counseling, which means giving strategic advice. And many of us, we seem to have lost. Thank you very much to all those who contributed, the presidents of the national associations who contributed. And I hand it back to you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you so much, country chairs who were part of this discussion. Thank you so much, everyone who asked a question or two. It obviously is a very topical conversation, but I think that, you know, the takeouts are clear. One is our role is completely strategic advisory, is important, and that is one way in which we can elevate the conversation by partnering in the business as strategic, you know, advisors. There were also a few comments, I think from Sarah, around how you operationalize PR, and she had me grinning because one of the ways not to operationalize PR is by, you know, picking up branding materials, you know, in her words. But thank you so much for that great contribution. If we do have any further questions or comments, please feel free to pop them in the chat. Very important to mention that the chat box is a part of the conversation. So it's not just for questions, it's also for contributions. So moving on right to the next speaker. We have him every year, always interesting insights. Remember we talked about yesterday that one of the strongest challenges every brand faces is how to build trust with your different stakeholders. And each year we have this person come speak to us and take us through the trust barometer. But before I go straight into his profile, he's Jordan Rittenbury. He's chairman of Middle East and Africa for Edelman. In his role, he has responsibility for the firm's growth across the region. So I think there's some feedback. May I respectfully request that the person everyone puts their microphone on mute. Thank you. Right, so I was saying to you that Jordan Rittenbury is chairman of Middle East and Africa for Edelman. He's looking after EMEA, which also includes Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Johannesburg, Nairobi, and Riyadh. He serves as strategic advisor to Edelman's largest clients through EMEA. He helps multinationals and some of the largest organizations in the region to navigate increasingly complex environments. He brings, you know, a wealth of experience working with C-suite executives, supporting them to evolve, promote, and protect brands' reputation. And he previously has spent 5 years in Africa, leading the agent's ascent into becoming the leading Pan-African communications consultancy and executing programs in more than 30 African countries. He's based in Johannesburg, South Africa, running a shop of more than 100 full-time staff across the continent, establishing a creative studio. He's been in service, you know, for I think over 15 years, you know, in marketing and corporate communications. You know, while he was based in the firm's headquarters in Chicago, he led Edelman's technology and business marketing practice, where again, he served as relationship manager to lots of firms. He holds a BA in public relations and advertising and graduated cum laude from the University of Houston. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please give a virtual warm welcome to Jordan Rittenbury.
Thank you, and thanks so much for having me. Let me just share my screen. I have to say, and I've said it before, presenting trust at APRA is one of my favorite presentations of the year. And we've been doing it since 2016. So I'm very, very fond of it. I'm sorry that we can't be here in person again this year, but hopefully again soon. When Edelman presented our trust barometer last year, when we developed our 2020 trust barometer, we were quite pleased and quite proud of it because we had been studying trust for 20 years and we had so many insights to draw from. However, this year, our 2021 trust barometer really is the most important year of studying trust, given the way in which the world was thrown in disarray in many, many reasons. And the fact that Edelman studies trust, it's not an arbitrary topic to study. We know time and time again that when an organization is trusted, people buy their goods and services, they pay more for them, they tell friends and family about them. They'll even go as far as buying stocks or shares in a company. On the inverse, when a company is not trusted, people say negative things about a company, they won't buy their goods and services, et cetera, et cetera. And we actually know that Africans are far more likely to take a positive or a negative reaction with regards to trust. So it is quite interesting. And how that impacts communications is really our job as communicators and as public relations practitioners is to evolve, promote, and protect brands and reputations, therefore building trust, therefore contributing to sales and the bottom line of an organization. So it really is quite fundamental. Jumping right in, again, we've been studying trust for 21 years. It's an online survey in 28 countries. We have 33,000 respondents. Additionally, what's quite interesting, this year is the first year that we've added Nigeria to the data. Last year, we added Kenya. So we have 2 years of Kenya data, 1 year of Nigeria data, and we've been studying trust in South Africa for the last 7 years. When we look at it, we have the online population, which is 1,150 respondents per country, but we'll also look at the informed public and the differences between that group and the mass population. And the informed public are those that are ages 25 to 64, university educated, top 25% of household income, and those that report themselves to be significant consumers of media. As we look, and it looks like there's some drawing on the screen there. As we look, it's been interesting looking at trust and how trust has evolved over time, and it's not really cyclical. It really does sort of ebb and flow and change with the times and what's going on in the world around us. In 2005, we saw trust shift from authorities to peers. In 2006, we saw a person like me become a credible spokesperson. Interestingly, Facebook was launched in 2004. And then following the global economic crisis in 2008, in 2009, subsequently, we saw trust in business plummet. More recently, we've really seen fake news coming to the forefront. In 2017, we saw trust in, frankly, a state of crisis. In 2018, a battle for truth. And this year, we're looking at the pandemic's ongoing impact around trust. And in many ways, the pandemic has defined this year, and that's quite obvious, right? However, when you look at it, we've also faced issues surrounding the movements around Black Lives Matter, around gender-based violence. We had Brexit, we had the US election. So really quite a number of things going on over the last year, but the pandemic really is core and has put trust to the test. When we look at trust as well, what we've created is a trust index. And a trust index is our average level of trust across business, media, government, and NGOs. And because we're looking at multiple markets and we have multiple markets from Africa included, this is the global data, but I'll call out African points as we go through. Globally, business is the most trusted institution, followed by NGOs, who are in the neutral position, along with government and media, again, in these levels of neutrality. Across South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria, business is the most trusted institution as well, again, followed by NGOs, and then media. And NGOs and media, NGOs are in a position of neutral, media are in a position of distrust. However, trust in government, of the 28 markets that we look at, Nigeria has the lowest level of trust in government, followed very closely by South Africa. And I think the data on Nigeria is 11% of the population trust the government. In South Africa, I think it's more about 17 right now. So high levels of trust in Africa and business, very low in government and media, NGOs doing okay. As we look at trust across all of our markets, what we see is when we look at the trust index, about a third of the countries we look at fall into a category of trust, which are those blue bars on the left. And then about a third fall into categories of neutrality, which is the central piece, and about a third in the levels of distrust. What we've seen is these changes over the last year due to the pandemic, and actually we see trust rising. And that's largely due to when we're in times of crisis, we see that's when we really see the best come out of government, media, or government and NGOs and business, then really stepping up to play a role. South Africa saw trust increase 4 points from 2020 to 2021. We also saw Kenya increase 2 points. So really doing quite well. We don't have year-over-year data on Nigeria yet because 2021 was the first year that we did study trust in Nigeria. What you'll also see in the table on the bottom right, because so much was happening over the course of 2019, we conducted multiple trust surveys to see what was happening to trust over the calendar year. And what we saw is really trust rising, what we call a trust bubble, but then quickly falling back into areas of norm. And in May 2020, this is when a lot of governments were imposing lockdowns. They were doing everything they could to keep citizens safe. Business was really responding and developing PPE. So we really did see levels of trust go up throughout the year, but then come back down. What we find quite challenging, though, is when we look at trust inequalities. And what we have on the left is levels of trust among the informed public, and on the right is levels of trust among the mass population. So on the left, those are university educated, top 25% of household income. And you see about two-thirds of the population falls into a level of trust. But on the right, nearly half of the population falls into a level of distrust if you're in the mass population category. Some key call outs: South Africa, their trust inequality is at 21 points. Last year, the trust inequality was 4 points. So a massive, massive gain there. A little bit of a better story, and actually quite a bit of a better story, the trust gap in Kenya is only 7 points. The trust gap in Nigeria is only 3 points. But by and large, globally, we're seeing record levels of trust inequalities. And why this is concerning to us is because your level of income and your level of education dictate the level of trust that you're going to have in these institutions. And that simply cannot continue over the long term. And of course, the pandemic, as we've seen, is further fueling fears. What we've seen is 84% of the population globally is concerned about job loss, with 53% being very concerned. 65% of the population is concerned about contracting COVID against job loss, right? And when you look at that, what this means very clearly is people are more worried about making money and putting food on the table than they are about their personal health and safety. Additionally, 56% of the population globally says as a result of the pandemic, a portion of our workforce has seen their hours reduced or has seen retrenchments or have jobs eliminated. So people are left wondering if they're next. And by the way, in the African markets that we look at, what we see is the concerns around job loss are far greater, about 10 points higher than 84, and the concerns around contracting COVID are about 10 points lower. So we see another big gap when it comes to the African markets that we look at. Additionally, and this is also not surprising, we see the pandemic is deepening inequalities around the world. 62% of the global population says those with less education, less money, and fewer resources are being unfairly burdened. Additionally, when you look at this, you see all of the world's developing markets on the left and many of the Western markets on the right. So in South Africa, 69% of the population believes this to be true. In Kenya and Nigeria, 65% of the population believes this to be true. So really a matter of the haves and the have-nots, frankly. Further complicating this, we see vaccine hesitancy remains a hurdle. Only 64% of the global population is willing to take a vaccine, and this doesn't have anything to do with accessibility, right? This is, are you willing to take the vaccine? In South Africa, only 49% of the population is willing to take the vaccine, whereas in other markets like Kenya, 66% of the population, Nigeria, 59%. This is far below the 70% that really is required for herd immunity. Additionally, while we know there's a global pandemic happening, what we also believe is there's an infodemic happening as well. People aren't trusting the information that they're getting, and they're actually believing that the information that they're getting is purposefully being false or misleading. Also, we've seen consumers really beginning to take matters into their own hands, and what we've seen is a large number of consumers are increasing their media literacy, their information literacy, their science literacy. So what they're actually doing is going out and conducting their own research so that they can form their own opinions rather than solely relying on what media is telling them or what they're hearing from friends and family. Along those same lines, what we see is, as we look at trust in different sources of media, we see search engines and traditional media at 56 and 53 points, owned media and social media at 41 and 35 points respectively. But across the board, what we've seen since 2019, over the last 3 years, we see trust in all three sources of information, or sources of media really hit historic lows. Only traditional media and search engines are in this category of neutrality. Across our African markets, no source of media falls into a trusted category either. I think search engines is the only source of media that falls into a level of trust. The other sources of media fall into a level of distrust. As I was referencing earlier, 59% of the global population says journalists are purposefully trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false or are gross exaggerations, where 59% of the population says that news organizations are more concerned with supporting an ideology or a political position rather than simply informing the public. And then 61% of the population says media is not doing well at being objective. These stats, all by the way, are very similar globally when we look at the data. And of course, this puts leadership in question, which isn't surprising. And we do have high levels of distrust, still happening today, despite glimmers of hope. But 57% of the population says our government leaders are purposefully trying to mislead our people by saying things they know are false or are gross exaggerations. This stat in Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya trends closer to almost 75%. 56% of the population says business leaders are purposefully trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false. This stat in our African markets is about 10% higher. And by the way, I have my email address at the end of the session. If anyone is interested in getting a copy of the data, I would be more than happy to share the local market reports if that's interesting to you. While we see these high levels of distrust in government and business and media and NGOs, what we do see is that people are bringing trust closer to themselves. So 76% of the population globally trusts their employer. So people do have high degrees of trust in things that they know and things that they have insight into. 76% of the population, again, in South Africa trusts their employer, 79% in Kenya, whereas 70% in Nigeria. And what this tells us is, again, in addition to people bringing trust closer to the center and that which they know, it means that employers have a very significant duty to fulfill these obligations. And how are we as employers focusing on informing our employees and making sure that they have trustworthy and credible information and that they know the reasons why in which we're taking certain actions or decisions. So never before has the importance of internal communications or employee engagement been more important than it is right now. And what we also see is, these levels of trust have created a new mandate for business. And again, as we look at business being the most trusted institution in Africa, it has an increased importance in these markets in which we operate. And in fact, 68% of the population says that business must step in when the government does not fix societal problems. They're looking for businesses to actually help solve some of the problems that are taking place in the world today. 66% of the population says business should take the lead on change rather than waiting for the government to impose change. The government's moving too slow. Business, we need you to step up. We need you to take action. We need you to help combat the pandemic and also these societal inequalities. 65% of the population globally said business should hold themselves accountable to the public and not just the board of directors or stockholders. In fact, we're seeing a movement more towards shareholders than stockholders across the world. These stats in our African markets trend about 7 to 12 points higher. So Africans are holding business and CEOs significantly more accountable than the rest of the population. And again, that goes back to high levels of trust in business. 86% of the global population believes that CEOs should publicly speak out about societal challenges. This stat in, I believe it's Kenya, is 95%. In South Africa, it's 90%.
Okay, So I note that Jordan is buffering. Is he back? Okay, you buffered for just a bit.
Oh, okay, perfect. Hopefully I didn't leave out too much. But what I was saying is Africans particularly expect CEOs to step up and take action. We have to push CEOs forward. CEOs are the individuals that consumers want to hear from, and these are the individuals that we need to be taking the lead, and particularly about societal change. And what that means is, when we do have issues surrounding gender-based violence or Black Lives Matter, we need CEOs and we need business to step up, because this is driving purchase power. And then finally, I wanted to spend a little bit of time just unpacking what this means for us as public relations practitioners. It's a lot of data and it's really insightful and important, but what does it mean quite practically, right? And how can we take this and apply this to our clients or our business today? Because I think the application is probably the most important part. Number one, business must embrace an expanded mandate. CEOs have to speak out and address societal issues around inequalities. And we've talked a lot about the challenges of PR today and the credibility, et cetera. However, what we need to do is move towards a place of action communications. We need to act first and talk about it later. Right now, the levels of distrust are too high. There's too many issues surrounding whether or not we're going to fulfill our promises. Let's act first, let's talk about it later. Business, we need to harness employer trust. We need to continue to bring employees close. We need to empower them to carry brands forward. These are our most valuable assets. We have to leverage them and we have to communicate with them early and often. Third, we have to provide trustworthy content. And as PR practitioners, we need to make sure that the data we're pushing out is correct and is applicable. We cannot have any questions about what we're doing. This is our ethics on the line as well. But we have to become publishers and create truthful, unbiased, and reliable information. And while there are low levels of trust in some media institutions, we have to leverage all media channels. We have to continue to reach individuals where they are. And we know that people have to see a message 6 to 8 times before they actually take it and believe it. And then finally, one institution can't go it alone. And while business does have a higher mandate than our other institutions, business, government, NGOs, and media must find a common purpose. We have to come together. We have to leverage leverage the power of the collective more than anything. I've gone through a lot of data very, very quickly, but I have my email address at the bottom. I'd be more than happy to share any of this data with everyone. It is quite interesting and quite unique, particularly in comparison to prior years of studying trust. But again, happy to share some of our country reports, as well as answer any questions that might come up.
So thank you so much, Jordan. You are right. This used to be quite a strong highlight for when we had the physical conferences, whether it was Rwanda, or was Botswana, I think, or perhaps,
Yes.
not sure if we had one in Nigeria. So you obviously rushed it on your own accord. I didn't ask you to. But maybe we're just going to leave, a lot of room for questions, because trust, obviously, as we know, is one of the most important tasks for us, being the link between the organization and the public. So if you do have questions, please put up your hands and then we will take them. The chat has been quite busy. I'm not sure why not sure why mine has shrunk in size, but you please feel free to put up your hands. And I can go first. I see a hand, so let's just be polite to, oh, this is Mrs. Ali Balogu. Please feel free, take the floor, Mrs. Ali Balogu.
Still on mute.
I think you're still muted. Unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I have conflicting instructions on my screen. Okay, thank you very much, Jordan. Thank you very much, Nkiru. Jordan, we are meeting again. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you about your sample population. I keep asking that. But you know, I quite admire your work, and I think it's a very useful work. But I would really like to know if you've been able to carry out a survey to find out how much impact the results of this barometer is getting, especially in business, in governance. I mean, it's not enough for us to tell us this is how people feel. Knowing how they feel, how is it impacting on governance? Have you been able to, I mean, do a survey to assess that? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think and a great question, and always good to see you as well. Always good to see you. Look, we study trust not because it's something interesting to do or something that gives us a point of view. We have to take the data and we have to leverage it. Otherwise, it's being lost, right? And I think, particularly as we look at this year, we have to use it as a roadmap. We have to encourage and actually require CEOs to take a lead on change, and CEOs have to be at the forefront. We're also counseling more and more clients now about action communications, which I mentioned, right? Like, take action first, talk about it later. There is a significant lack of trust right now. Credibility is damaged globally. The way in which to get that back is let's act first and talk about it later. We also talk a lot about, and you mentioned governance as well, radical transparency is key. And it makes organizations and our clients nervous because they don't want to be radically transparent. And we have to take a stand, and we can't take no for an answer. We have to truly do credit and service to the industry and the profession. And we have to show our clients and our businesses that we're not a support function. We are strategic counselors with your reputation at key and at heart. And that's what we're working to advance. We've also, begun to sort of change some of the policies internally at Edelman, actually, making sure that and putting some of the onus on us to fact check the information that we're getting and not simply take whatever a client might tell us and push it out blindly and say, well, client X told us this, so surely it's fine. Like, we're actually challenging ourselves to ensure that we're putting forward trustworthy content and information.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jordan. I think this is a comment more than it's a question. It's from Sony. And Sony says, Jordan, this is very useful. There you go. This is very useful report. And she talks about including more markets only as we carry on discussions around AFCTA. I mean, I think a lot of it is also, a lot of the comments in the box is also thanks. I see that Adewale Adeni has his hands up. I would let him go and then I'll ask a question. Please take the floor, Adewale Adeni. Please take the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Nkiru, and thank you very much, Jordan, for this wonderful presentation. It's always very, very nice listening to you. And of course, I'm beginning to develop very deep interests in this space of PR. Two big issues that seems to shape trusts in 2020. The first is the Donald Trump phenomenon. And it was a very big issue to everybody around the globe because it seems to redefine the narrative in government information and perhaps credibility of government information. The second one is the infodemic associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. And there were lots of information, particularly surrounding the efficacy and the importance of the vaccinations throughout the world. Having these two at the background, how do you think PR practitioners can help to restore credibility in government information? I work in the public sector, and we put a lot of information out there, and because of some of these things, people tend to disbelieve and don't trust the information that comes from this space. How do you think PR can help to restore confidence? Thank you, Jordan.
Absolutely, thank you. And yeah, absolutely, great questions. What I would say, you mentioned Trump initially, and I think the challenge there obviously is, again, the the way in which he used Twitter and other social media channels to communicate directly with consumers obviously increases the ability to spread misinformation or disinformation, right? With regards to the infodemic, I think it makes it increasingly important for us, like consumers are going to multiple sources and searching out information that's going to answer the questions that they have. They're taking matters into their own hands, right? And we see a lot of consumers are actually going out and Googling stories that they're seeing to test the search engines and to see what the search engines are telling them, because they don't believe it if they're getting it from a news organization. I think as communicators, we need to leverage the entire media ecosystem of earned, owned, paid. We need to look at also like platforms and publishers to ensure we're reaching consumers. We can't solely rely on earned media or on social media or on traditional media or any other platforms. We have to leverage all of the platforms in order to reach our consumers so that they can get the most trustworthy information across all sources of content, right? Because if they're going out and Googling information, they're going to find it in different places. And look, with regards to what the government can do to improve communications or to increase trust, I would come back to, again, radical transparency and action communications are going to be very important topics. But I would also say it's not going to be an easily won journey, right? It's going to take a lot of work and it's going to take a lot of time. I think we've all heard the quote, it takes years to build a reputation, but only seconds to destroy it. And I think that's the situation a lot of governments are in terms of we need to actually walk the talk and we need to be open with consumers. We need to answer the hard questions. We need to invite the hard questions and actually have a dialogue with consumers, right? We can't take a state-owned government approach to increase or build trust. It has to be much more transparent than that. This time it's you and Kira.
I can't believe I got hit by this mute thing. But I think, Jordan, thank you so much. We're going to have to let you off. Thank you for offering to share the presentation. I'm sure the Secretariat will be in touch to move this forward. If there are any other questions, I believe we do have a session with you tomorrow, if I remember the schedule. I'm sure we'll connect further. So thank you, Dr. Abraham. I apologize. If you pop the questions in the chat with Mrs. Ali Balogun, I'm sure that Jordan can pick it. You know, he doesn't need to be on the virtual stage to be able to pick it. Sincerest apologies, Dr. Abraham and Mrs. Ali Balogun. So really quickly, we're going on to our next speaker. And I'd like first to apologize to all the speakers. We are running behind time. I think just to say that we have taken just a bit from our break time to use to make up for what we have lost. But very quickly, we're going on to our next speaker, who is speaking to us about Africa as an example of how to do risk communication right. Africa as an example of how to do risk communication right. And our speaker is Philip Boremans. He's an independent public relations consultant specializing in emergency risk and communication, and he's president of International Public Relations Association. He works on strategic communication projects for epidemic and pandemic preparedness with organizations like the World Health Organization, the European Union, and the West African Union. Before emigrating to Morocco and later to Portugal, he was Chief Social Media Officer and CSR Coordinator at Van Mack Trading Group. For 10 years, he has held several communication positions at IBM, including corporate and online communications at national and European level. Philip started his public relations career at Porta Novelli International in Brussels. He's a regular guest lecturer at universities and business schools across Europe and North Africa. I mentioned earlier that he is currently the president of the International Public Relations Association. Ladies and gentlemen, may I ask that you give Philip a virtual warm welcome. Welcome, Philip. Good to see you again.
Hi, everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces. It's always great, even if it's virtual, to meet you all. Thank you, Nkiro, for the introduction. Yomi, How are you, Mr. President? It's great to see you all. So thanks, first of all, for the invitation. It's really an honor, and you know, the continent has a special place in my heart, having lived there and having worked there. So it's always an opportunity to get in touch with you and talk about our beautiful profession. When I was asked on the kind of topic I wanted to cover, I was thinking that, yes, you know, a lot has been said about this pandemic, but I wanted to go back to my experiences on the African continent over the last 400 days or so, and focus a little bit on emergency risk communication and the link maybe, or the synergies or the potential synergies between crisis communications, and then looking at that from the African continent. And it was also an enormous opportunity, and I'll start with that, to take off my virtual hat of all those very hard-working public sector Ministry of Health communicators who have been working day and night with very, very limited resources on protecting all of you from this pandemic. And having worked there on the ground with them, having had the opportunity to train them as well, it is incredible. I'm still in contact with many of them, and it's really a salute to their work, to their almost volunteering work, because it is impressive. If we look at it now after 400 days on a global perspective, and this is not to say this country was wrong and this country managed it better, but if objectively we look at how this pandemic has been managed from a communications point of view and the results, Africa and several countries in Africa can learn other countries a lot of things. And I'll point out a couple of them. First of all, and I've seen the chat people also mentioning this, and it's definitely something that is so true. It is your, I think, cultural inclination, first of all, but also your approach to community engagement, to community communication. When I was on the ground in Africa, working with colleagues in Liberia, Sierra Leone, Benin, the importance of community engagement, meaning as a communicator, being completely in tune with the communities around you, be it from a cultural, religious, language, whatever kind of hook you take, is crucial. And we've seen that now. We've seen that now, that is where good communications, and then from there crisis communications and emergency risk communication starts and ends. And I think that is something that we will take, and when I say we, that's on a global scale, we will take from the engagements in Africa and the work in Africa. That also in Europe, also in other places around the globe, we need to get back in touch with our communities and put the communities first, and then start organizing a communications plan. So that is one of the things that I've seen happening and learned as well, and that I'll be taking with me and also communicating to other colleagues in the sector. Very important. So your community engagement work is definitely an example for many other countries. The other aspect which I've seen is the way that engagement and communities and media relations is done. There was a discussion about the brown envelope and all these things, but when I see when it really matters in the context of an emergency, of a crisis, I see that there is a tradition in media relations that media and journalists are implicated in different kinds of training. And again, that is something which is should be included in any kind of emergency and crisis communications aspect, where in what we call peacetime, when there is no urgency, when there is no emergency, we do include members of the media in information sessions, in training sessions, just to give them the correct background so that when something happens, they can communicate in a correct context with the correct wording. And that is not, I'm not talking about influencing or manipulating. It is factual information so they can make their decisions, but based on factual information, a good environment, and also on relationship building. Previous speaker was talking about trust. When is the best time to invest in trust? It is during peacetime. It's not in the middle of an urgency or a crisis situation that you're going to build trust. If you haven't built trust beforehand, you have nothing to go on when it matters the most. And that is something that I've seen happening, which is again something that we out of Africa need to take with us, because that is not a tradition that we have. I was just discussing this aspect with my client for the moment, and we're working on capacity building packages for emergency risk communicators. And we said the media relations part needs to be adapted and upgraded to include this. So experience that we see on the ground, also in Africa, do influence the next iteration of global training systems for emergency risk communicators. So those two aspects, I think, are really crucial. The other one that is maybe more general, but I wanted to share with you, because there is a lot of opportunity also in Africa and different countries, is that we need to build bridges, and that the pandemic has shown very clearly. We need to build bridges between emergency risk communicators and crisis communicators. We need to build bridges between the private sector and the government sector. And not only those two, also the communities in between. We need to foster these relationships, because we all know the next epidemic and the next pandemic is on the agenda. We know that. And you should know that, and you all know that. Your countries have suffered from different epidemics, and unfortunately, that will happen again. And a pandemic is a global fact, but we know that in the future, there will be another pandemic. So this is the best moment, I think. We are in a very small recovery phase, very small. Let's catch it and move on. But from a professional communications point of view, I do think that this is the exact moment where we need to look at a kind of operational model where, from a communications point, private sector, government sector, and the communities can come together and build a system where we are preparing for the next one. And that's what we need to start doing now. And that's also going to happen if crisis communicators and emergency risk communicators come together and talk to each other. But today, we are not really talking to each other, right? And that should happen now. This is the perfect opportunity. Another opportunity, and I would close them because I really would like to get your feedback and take enough time for Q&A. Another one is getting back in touch with our academic colleagues. We need to get back to science-based communication. Yes, it is true. We have a creative part in our profession as public relations professionals, and it is fun to do, and it's also something worth to do. But let's not forget, it's not all about creativity. It's about being scientific in what we do. And by doing science-based communication, we will increase trust. We will fight fake news, infodemic, what have you. And we also become better as professionals. And so that is the last message, let's say, that I wanted to share with you. And also, and it's also an open invitation, right? APRA, we are friends and colleagues, but everyone participating here who has the willingness to work towards that, please get in touch with both of these organizations and with us personally. I don't have an issue. Send me an email and we'll work on that. But we need to work together on that. So just to recap, you are an example in community engagement and community communications, and your examples will be taken into account worldwide. You are an example in the kind of media relations where journalists are informed and trained before something happens. That again is a very important aspect. We need more science-based communications, and I think we do need to work on that. And we do need to build bridges between crisis comms and emergency risk comms and the communities that we work for. Those are a couple of challenges, but the opportunities are there. It is the moment to move forward. This pandemic has then this positive side that we can see these things clearly now, and that we definitely know in which direction to go. And so in fact, what I just did here is an open invitation for all of us to collaborate over the distances, over continents and country lines. And that's why I think as well that an association as APRA exists and APRA exists, and that's why we are partners. So open invitation. Thank you all, but I really wanted to keep it short and to the point so that we can have a discussion and Q&A. Thank you.
Okay, guys, can you please unmute me? Thank you. Cool stuff. Thank you so much, Philip. Very valuable, very straight to the point. Engage when there's no emergency. Relationship building is critical. If you were to leaning back onto Jordan's trust, if you want to build trust, emergency risk communicators and crisis communicators must engage. And then obviously go back to science-based communication. So thank you, really, really valuable comment. I'm looking through the chat, and I think one is just a positive comment. I wondered if there was anyone who had a question. Philip is keen to respond to any questions you may have. Please raise up your hands. And Philip, I suppose just whilst the question is coming, I'm going to ask you to differentiate between science-based communication and insight-based communication. I hope I had questions.
Yeah, for me, it all starts with science-based. I mean, insights, you can get insights, but your insights should be, again, influenced by at least scientific research. And that is a big word. I know, it's like, I never had scientific studies, so I'm not the best one. But if you can go back to, let's look at something important, for instance, I'll give you a practical example. When I'm sent out for one of my clients, like a WHO on the ground, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Togo, I'm sent out in a team aspect. And one of the people I work with is a sociologist or an anthropologist. Why? Because I can get a gut feeling and I can say, oh, I know the African culture and I've lived there and what have you. But I don't know the impact that, for instance, traditional medicine in the context of a country where the voodoo religion is very common, but also mixed with other religions, how that impacts the risk perception, the health perception, all these, I don't know that. So I need people on the ground. That is science-based. It's not there's someone who says, oh, I've been living here for 10 years. I know how it goes. No, that is scientific research. And so then you get the insights. Then me, as a non-local, based on that research, I can get an insight and say, okay, so if we want to influence behavior in the context of health, I have to work with a traditional doctor. I have to work with the imam, I have to work with the voodoo priest, and I have to work with the Catholic priest. And we have to work together. That's how we start to build community engagement. So those are the insights. But the science, that comes from scientists. Yeah.
Okay, cool stuff. Thank you. I haven't seen any questions, but I mean, if you are here for the rest of the day, I'm sure that people, will pop in questions and pop in comments and connect further. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time. Always a pleasure to connect to you, and I'm sure we'll connect further. Cheers.
Same here. Thank you very much, and happy Africa Day.
Thank you. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, apologies for every speaker who we have kept delayed. We are running out of time, but we are making good progress. The best that will happen to us is we're taking 15 minutes away from our break time. So we're going straight on to the next session. And the next session is a panel session. And on this panel would be in this particular panel session would be founder and CEO of Stratus Group, in the person of Kamal Taibi. And also Chairman Middle East and Africa for Edelman, Jordan Rittenbury. But we have read Jordan's profile, so I think we will just do a quick read of Camille's profile, and then we can go straight into the conversation. I think what is important to mention is, because this is a virtual conference, we're using the chat box for conversation. So if you do have a build, you do have a view, you do have thoughts you'd like to share, please feel free to pop it into the chat, and then someone else will comment. I know a few of that, has gone on this morning, but okay, right on to inviting Kamal to the virtual stage. So Kamal founded Stratus Group, one of the leading firms in public relations and public affairs, alongside strategic communications in North Africa. In 2010, according to the Holmes report for EMEA, Stratus Group had quickly established itself as one of the most capable and thought independent firms in the fast-growing North Africa regions. Leading an international team of specialists on the ground in Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Mauritania, Senegal, and other leading markets in the North and West Africa. Camille has used his experience of over 15 years in public affairs, public relations and communication to build an organization that has become synonymous with excellence and prestige. He has advised lots of governments on related to transitioning, related to budgeting and other issues. In 2013, he served as communication counsel to Morocco's Minister of Economy and Finance. He speaks on, communication across various countries and organizations. He's spoken at Cape Town, London, Hong Kong, and in Morocco, he serves as a board member of the Moroccan Commerce and Services and vice president of the Moroccan Employers General Confederation. He also is a founding member of the TANMIA, helping NGOs with the use of ICT. So I think it's welcome, Kamal. I know that you're not a stranger at all to many of us, the attendees. So the virtual floor is yours. Over to you now.
Thank you very much, Nkiru. I hope everyone is hearing me now.
Yes. Yes. Good.
So maybe I'm waiting for Jordan maybe to connect. And I also want to thank you again for the introduction. This lengthy, you send a bio and sometimes it's red and it's long. Thank you. So I just, here we are, here's Jordan. Yes. And I also want to commend the presence of Olivia and Loga, my dear friend for a long, long time. So we worked together back in the years, I think back in 2016. And she is now the communications manager for Francophone Africa for Facebook. And I'm really happy to have her with us. And I'm also happy to have someone from Francophone Africa, because this amazing work done by APRA in many parts of Africa, and progressively we are gaining terrain, if I may say, in the Francophone region, and connect people from West, South, North, and West Africa. So this is tremendously important, and I want to commend APRA's work on that, and Yemi and his amazing team. Thank you again. So as we have only 15 minutes to 20 minutes, I want to go straight forward to it. So I suggested we discuss our theme today that I called with conversation with Jordan and Olivia, and our theme was Africa and reputation-based economies. Basically, I wanted to discuss this, and all of us wanted to discuss this because we wanted to bring to attention that the critical reputation-based everything from businesses to organizations to governments is amazingly valid and challenging in Africa as it is in the rest of the world and every other place. This is, I said again, amazingly valid in Africa because African youth has been very, very quick to embrace social communications tools and also embracing the global mindset, if I may say, to give credit and credibility to whom, in fact, to give credit and credibility only to whom it deserves it. So not to everyone. This is a kind of new reality. We as professionals of communications, it's not new. We have discussed this in a different places, and we know that. So we sometimes smile when you have a CEO telling you, "Yo, everyone is talking about our reputation now. Do we have to justify what we do on every day?" So give us some smile. But it's something that we have to tackle as professionals in communications, and we have to guide these people and guide these C-suite rooms to make the right decisions about their reputation. So this digital revolution has increased the availability of data. The degree of connectivity is tremendous right now, and by them, we have this speed at which decisions are made. If the decisions were before only at those rooms in C-suites or other, now the decisions is on an iPhone or a mobile phone. And so everyone has the power now to decide if he respects or not a politician, a government, an organization, or a brand. So this is crucial in increasing the speed at which an organization, a government, or a business reputation can change in the eyes of consumers and employees. And so I wanted to invite Jordan and Olivia to discuss this with me. This past year and this year, we are still living how a reputation matters. And it is in our conversations on a daily basis. On every day, you hear people talking about a brand or a government decision. Vaccines is changing the conversation on maybe sometimes in the morning you have a mindset, in the evening you have another one. So this is all, I think, is related to reputation. And so this is why we say reputation-based economy, because everything is economy, and economy is driven by reputation right now. So this is, I think, crucial. So I wanted to discuss with my dear friends here about this. If we see the literature, you can find these conversations in Europe, in the US, in North America, and elsewhere. But it is important, and especially in this window offered by APRA, the best one, to discuss these matters, because our CEOs and our government leaders, our NGO leaders need to understand this and embrace it and act on it on a daily basis. And we are the community that needs to work harder to convince these people to take this into account. So let me first go to Olivia. And thank you again, Olivia, to be with us today. I'm very, very happy to talk to you in front of this great audience. So I want to ask you, you are an African lady, basically, but I want to tell everyone that you are based in Paris. Maybe you can say 2 words about yourself, but can you share with us, as an African professional acting on a big part of Africa for a huge brand such as Facebook. So can you maybe tell us, how do you profile this African audience when you're talking internally? No secrets, of course. And I don't think we need them, but can you give us your perspective on how you talk about the African audience inside the company, how Facebook is a very modern company, and so it is quite a driver of repetition for everyone, but it is important to see how do you guys deal with that.
Thank you so much for these questions. And I am indeed very proud of speaking in front of such an inspiring audience of my fellow PR practitioners. So to your question, and to say a little bit about myself, I am currently based in Paris, but I am Cameroonian. I was born in Cameroon. I think that we met when I was living in Gabon. I've lived in Kenya as well. So I've lived in a number of countries across the continent, but also I've also worked in a number of countries across the continent. I think more than, I don't know, 30, I can't even count them. And my job today at Facebook is to look after, is to lead our communication efforts in French-speaking Africa. So that's quite a number of countries as well. So to answer to your questions, how do I make sure that I have an impact as an African in my company? First of all, I have to say that I'm very privileged. I'm privileged because I work for a startup company, and as big as Facebook has become, we are a startup. So that means that the way we operate, the way we behave, and the culture inside the company is very much a startup culture where everyone, we still have, we have very horizontal management. Everyone is allowed to play. Everyone has the autonomy and the freedom to make an impact if they want to. So yeah, so I think that's also one of the reasons, because I think we met when I was still working in agency, and the reason why I made that move from agency to corporate was because I was within a company where the way we function, the way we operate still looks very much as an agency. So to give you a concrete example, Africa Day is important at Facebook, and we have a community of Africans at Facebook that are very passionate about the continent. So the first thing that I believe we do in this company is that we recruit people that are passionate about the work that they're going to do. So, and it feels pretty much like a family. And I have to say that when we have gatherings, when we are at global events, you can see that the Africans working at Facebook are very proud, and they are very excited about the work that they do. So the key to success is being in a company where your expertise, not only your expertise, but your knowledge of the region is not only a knowledge, but this is like precisely the reason why you were recruited in this company, because they knew that you were passionate and that you wanted to make a change. And to give you an example, just a few days ago, we launched an amazing campaign at Facebook, which is called Made by Africa and Loved by the World. In this campaign, we profiled creators from all across the continent, musicians, fashion designers, and so on and so forth. And basically, and this campaign was crafted by the team that I'm privileged to work in, the Africa Comes team at Facebook. So this is just an example of how being an African and working in a global company, you can decide that, of course, this is what you're paid for, but we can only go above and beyond, and craft campaigns, design messages that you believe make sense for the community that you serve. Internally as well, we are doing the work. We're doing this work externally because, again, this is what we are paid for at some point, although we are not paid for the passion. This passion we provide for free. But we also had, just yesterday, I held an internal summit that was called The Future is Africa at Facebook. So we also have these conversations internally. And I believe that wherever we are, and I will try to stop there to let Jordan speak as well. But I strongly believe that as African, whatever we are, what we have to do is not only our job, but we serve the continent. So the conversations that we believe are important externally, it's our duty to bring them externally. And I'm again very thankful that I also find a very positive and attentive audience within Facebook.
Thank you very much, Olivia, and I'm happy to see you sharing all of these positive things. I want to jump to Jordan. So Jordan as a big player on the agency side and having this amazing experience in Africa, I've been testifying of it since day one. So I was really happy to meet you almost at your arrival to Africa. So how do you connect this reputation-based economy and your advising brands from global perspective into the markets in Africa? And also, how do you do that with local brands? Because I know that you have a very nice balanced portfolio of clients from local and international clients. And so how do you tackle that around Africa?
Yeah, it's actually funny, Kamal, and always good to see you and the team as well. It's funny that you keep talking about this reputational economy, because the way in which we constantly counsel our clients regarding reputation or regarding reputational issues is you're putting credits in the bank, right? And we hope you don't need to make a withdrawal. It's these things you do, like a savings account, over years and years and years, they build and they create something, and they gain interest, et cetera, et cetera. And then after a long time, you've built a really significant reputation. And once you have that, you have a community around you that will come to defend you should you need it. And you have these stakeholders who are on board and on side because they've seen what you've done over years and years and years. And it is over years and years and years. It's not something that can be done overnight. I think as we're counseling a lot of big brands as well, we keep talking about, one of the most important things that you can do is demonstrate how you're improving the societies and the communities within which you operate, particularly as global brands coming into Africa. You can't come into Africa and take. It's not about that, and it's not going to work. You have to come into Africa and be additive. And how are you improving people's lives, making people's lives better, whether it's increasing access to technology or financial literacy and inclusion. And also, we see a lot of brands are being very weary, global brands, of taking a stand on issues. And particularly in the world in which we live today, this is a big reputational driver. You have to take a stand. You can't simply come into the continent and sit on the sidelines and assume those are the issues of Morocco, or those are the issues of Nigeria or Kenya. Once you come in, you have to show up locally. You have to act locally and think globally. And I think that's a really important piece. And then even for some of Africa's largest brands, we're working very closely with them to build ESG plans, and those are very, very important. Environmental, society, and governmental plans. Or governance plans. How are we pulling these things together for some of Africa's biggest brands? And it's funny, we were developing a response to a very, very large RFP. And part of the RFP was really, what is our thinking around ESG, right? And one of the questions was, what's the biggest risk? Or what are the communications challenges you see with executing an ESG program? And I think we kind of threw them for a loop, because we were like, the only challenge is you. Like, if it's you doing the work. Are you going to stand up and do what you say you're going to do? Are you going to have an impact? Are you going to be very transparent? And are you going to show, the full scope of what you're doing and intending to do? Because if you do that, my job is very easy. My job is very, very easy. I can go out and communicate those things. But I think they were a bit taken aback by that response. And I think those are a few of the just very key thoughts. And I think the other interesting thing is the long-term effect of what we do now. And we've conducted surveys over the course of the last couple of years outside of trust. And one of the questions was essentially the way in which a company responds to the pandemic now will influence my decisions forever, right? And I think forever is a very long time, but people are paying attention right now to how brands are responding, and are you doing good? And I think that's going to have a lasting impact on people's memories.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Continuing with you, Jordan. So what can you say about your experience in Africa now? You and your team are managing a big chunk of Africa for many global and African clients. So how do you see the evolution of mindset versus reputation from the C-suite? How do you think people mindset has evolved through these last couple of years, and maybe specifically through the eye of COVID that we have lived for the last 18 months now?
Yeah, and I think it's actually great news, Kamal, because I think, over the last few years, we've seen, at least our business, we're working more and more closely with the CEOs. I think that they're beginning to see the value we can provide as counselors on their reputation, or in terms of time of crisis when they need us most. We're working closely with them on things like earnings and things like that. So and I've been in Africa about 5.5 years, so by no means a long time, only a brief period of time. But I've seen quite an evolution over what's really a short amount of time. We're regularly in the C-suite counseling clients on some of the biggest issues impacting their business today. And I think what's also perhaps most interesting is it's also not just around communications issues, right? It's around business issues. We were working for a large organization early on in COVID, and they were considering their way to they were considering the financial implications of how they would respond to a particular issue, and whether or not, or whether they were looking at the risk and the amount of money they were about to spend on a particular initiative. And it was like, our counsel was, you need to do the right thing. Like, you need to do the right thing. You need to show up. You need to show people that you're helping them. And if you spend this money on this initiative, it will come back to you tenfold. And they wound up going forward with the initiative, and were very much hailed for their good efforts. So we're getting closer and closer to tying the business of the business to the communications. And I think that's a really important shift that I've seen really over the last 2 or 3 years, frankly, in our business.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jordan. I'm turning now to Olivia, and I want to ask you, how do you see the role of reputation shaping behavior from the brand's perspective? We've seen last couple of years some stances, if I may say, or some engagement from very surprising sometimes from some brands, like we have seen on minimal wage in some places in North America and in other places, but also on race and issues in the US. Today marks 1 year since I think Floyd has been killed in the US, and so many companies have been communicating yesterday and today about this 1 year mark. And so this is shaping a little bit and taking everyone off guard last year, and today everyone is preparing for this anniversary. We professionals, we know how anniversaries are important in crisis management. So everyone yesterday was tweeting that for tomorrow is 1 year and we are preparing, etc., etc. And we have also see what Nike has done with kneeling in front of the president of the United States, etc. So you as a brand, how are you seeing your reputation or the reputation of the brand you work for as a behavior in the decision making towards your audiences?
So Kamal, because
I know it's a crazy and big question. Sorry about that, but we are between us professionals. No one is hearing us. You can tell.
Indeed, because I'm speaking with and I'm talking to PR experts, and I'm going to state the obvious. We all know that reputation matters, and we all know that reputation is can have a huge impact and actually influence the business decision. But maybe the few comments that I want to make is, first of all, doing good has to be part of your DNA. So it's not just only about this happen and then I'm going to do that, exactly. Or I'm going to do that because I want to to check some items in my CSR report. Companies and businesses have to include doing good as part of their DNA. So, and the other thing that I want to say is, and to give an example, Jordan was talking earlier about the COVID-19 pandemic. During the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the things that we did as Facebook in the African continent is that we worked hand in hand with the ministers, with the government, to make sure that because we are a tech company, because we are a social platform with so many people connected on Facebook, to make sure that they are able to connect with those people to share the correct information on COVID-19. So in a number of countries across the continent, as you are opening your Facebook account, you will have a section with information from your minister of health, all these type of things. So when we do that not only because we can or we have the means, but when we do such things, it's because we believe that a company doesn't live in a bubble, right? A company lives in the middle of an ecosystem, of an environment, and more the public is taking us accountable for what we do and how we behave in the environments where we operate. We also developed a solution on WhatsApp. On WhatsApp, we helped government develop WhatsApp chatbots, so that they can reach out to people directly with correct information on COVID-19. And so this is one of the things that I wanted to say about reputation. But to be honest, we also know that sometimes we react too late, or sometimes the things that we do are not well understanding, which is why it needs to be a constant effort. First of all, to make change part of the business principles. What we are today or how we operate today is not set in the model. Change is essential for a business to keep evolving, to keep understanding the people that they are serving. And we try. I'm not saying that we succeed all the time, but we try at least at Facebook to do that. And maybe the last other thing that I wanted to say.
The last
was,
one, yes.
Yeah. No, I'm so talkative. But,
please say.
But yes, and we need also to keep explaining how we operate, keep explaining what we do, keep explaining, and people are not, our users or our customers are not kids, they are grown-ups. They can understand if we decide that it is important for us to explain to them.
Thank you, Olivia, for this. And I may say that Tewu, who's behind the scenes, sending me a message on your platform, WhatsApp, saying, Kamal, can you start to wrap up? Yeah, it's been my pleasure to have you both on this conversation. I think this conversation needs more than 15 or 20 minutes. That needs a long time to discuss, and this is a tremendously important for the government, brands, organizations, but also important to the agency side or the professional side. So we may continue the conversation in next chapters of the conference of APRA, and I am really happy to have you both here. Thank you a lot for your perspectives, and also thank you to the people at APRA organizing this. Thank you very much. Hopefully there are questions. We are open to questions. Maybe if there are, we're happy to tackle them.
I'm happy to take any other questions offline. And thank you so much, APRA, for having me. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, absolument. Nkiru, you decide what we should do. Our best host ever.
No, thank you so much, Kamal. Thank you for leading the conversation. You are right. We definitely need a bit more time for this conversation. And I think it's important to mention that APRA has, webinar series away from the conference. And I feel like this conversation is so topical, we can actually move it over into that webinar. Olivia, also to say, lovely to meet you. I didn't get the chance to introduce you, but I'm glad that you did. I also note that alongside a huge experience from the agency side, you do have some public sector experience, which is good stuff. So well done. Thank you, Jadan. Lovely to see you, everyone. We will move on right next to the next program on our schedule. So thank you and cheers. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being such an amazing audience. I think it's so important that you each give yourself a loud virtual clap. If you can see me, I said to you earlier that it does get lonely when you don't see faces and you see only the screens. So if you can turn on your screen and give yourself a big virtual round of applause for being an amazing audience, for listening, for engaging, for asking lots of questions. So thank you and well done. This is not at all the end of it. I'd like to call on someone to just do us an early morning recap of what we have learned. And then we will take just the next few instructions. Remembering also that we do have a full agenda for this afternoon. Really great conversations coming through from the Chief Marketing Officer of FlySafe Africa, of the Chief Inclusion Officer of BCW Africa. Very excited about that because inclusion is a very important piece. So I'd like to invite onto the virtual stage the Public Relations and Communications Manager for National Water Supply and Sanitation Council, Mpunga. It's Mpunga here. If Mpunga is not here, we will go on break. So ladies and gentlemen, we are proceeding on a few minutes break. I'm gonna say circa 15 minutes, a 15 minutes break. We will be returning at 12:50 Nigerian time. We'll be returning at 12:50 Nigerian time, which I believe is 3:50 East African time. I believe it's 2:50 South African time. And I think that for Ghana, you've just got to do +2 GMT. So we are returning at 12:50 Nigerian time. If you don't remember anything else, please remember that it's only a 15 minutes break. And a great way to go on break during virtual conferences is to leave yourself signed in and just pop out for a drink or a quick meal and return. I've worked in the aviation sector for many years. I find aviation particularly exciting. So I'm looking forward to listening to the CMO of FlySafe. I'm also looking very excitedly to listening to the Chief Inclusion Officer who's coming through. So it is a packed and interesting afternoon. So it's bye everyone, have a good break and see you shortly. Cheers. I can see from our chat that we do have a few people still away, but we do have a large audience still. So it was a very full morning for me. We started off with talking about the economic, the role that public relations plays in economic development. We graduated onto having conversations around how PR is faring across 3 countries, 2 of which, one was in the south, I beg your pardon. One was in the east, it was Zambia, Uganda, and obviously we had Mr. President also give his views from a continental perspective. And then we moved on to having the conversation, around trust. We went through the trust barometer, and it was interesting to see trust levels across the public sector, trust levels across the private sector. And then we moved on to discussing, communication, risk management communication. And, we talked about, the best time to build those relationships now and not in the middle of a crisis, understanding, that a crisis, to quote Philip, the next crisis or the next pandemic is just down along the corridor. And we just ended, with a conversation from what I call the agency and the client side. It was Facebook and Edelman with Camille moderating. And then we had, conversations about how to communicate, the role of practitioners, and I suppose just a simple piece of being an African working girl who has worked across brands. So welcome back to the afternoon session. I promised you that it's going to be very exciting. I'm going to be very full. I'm particularly excited and looking forward to two sessions on this piece. So I see that someone has summarized, and it's APRA, has summarized all of the takeaways. So thank you so much, APRA, for this summary. We will go straight into our next speaker in a few minutes. But in the meantime, so this was what we took out, or what APRA took out, or what the Secretariat took out, and what I took out. If you can just pop into the chat one thing that you learned from the first session, I think that would be valuable. Please just pop into the chat, so important. I said to you that it gets quite lonely here. So if you can pop into the chat what it is that you learned, that will be great. That would be great. So I haven't seen anyone popping anything to the chat, but I'm expecting you. So we're going to have a conversation around rethinking the purpose and meaning of leadership in a post-COVID Africa. Rethinking the meaning and the purpose of leadership in a post-COVID Africa. I mean, people say to me very often that anyone can be a leader. And I say to them, more so a marketing and communications practitioner, only because marketing and public relations is about influence. And leadership in itself is about influence. And therefore, what it means is that we are both, influencing public opinion. So it'll be great to hear what these subject matter experts have to say. And in no particular order, I would like to call on the Chief Marketing Officer for FlySafe. And before I call him onto the virtual stage, I would like to read Kebi's profile. And Kebi, only because I was in aviation for so long and completely love the sector, I'm going to perhaps read your profile with some prejudice. I'm sure I'm allowed that. So Kebi Gordon is the Chief Marketing Officer for FlySafe Air. He joined the company in early 2015, shortly after their launch. Kebi studied economics and politics at Rhodes University here in South Africa. He later read for a master's in business administration at University of Cape Town's Graduate School of Business. FlySafe Air is Kebi's first foray into travel industry. His career focus has been on e-commerce and online marketing, which had previously seen him as head of marketing at Kalahari.com and at Samlan right before that. So welcome, Kebi, and feel free to stand on the virtual stage as I call the other panelists to join you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you still are writing, can I please just ask that you pop into the chat everything that you've learned this morning, anything. I know that APRA shared, some of theirs, and so did I share mine. So it'll be great that you also share yours. So right next to him is a communications director for EMEA from Microsoft, which is Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So Leo McKay is a communications director for Microsoft. He's been working inside a community charged with advancing and protecting the Microsoft brand as the company empowers every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. Focused on key priorities like innovation, cloud, digital transformation, privacy, and AI, Leo has taken keen interest in how measurements and data are both transforming communication and how these insights can be used to tell more compelling stories. He has traveled extensively on the continent, and he played a lead role in establishing a partner network agency on the continent. Prior to joining Microsoft, he had held senior roles at Nokia and Fleshland Hilliard, both based on the continent. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Please come onto the virtual stage. We are very happy to see you. Look, now by no means the last, I would like to invite to the virtual stage, I would like to invite Sarah Gooding, who is the Managing Director of WE Communications. And I'm just going to read through her profile before I hand over the stage, and we will have a healthy conversation on leadership. So Sarah has worked in the communications industry for 20 years, from consultancies in the UK and South Africa, as well as on-site at Microsoft South Africa. Her experience spans across B2B and B2C, having worked on strategy development and crisis communication for multiple local and international brands. Microsoft is one of the brands she's worked on, alongside more than a couple of blue chip brands. She's a spokesperson at various industry conferences, such as the Holmes Report, and sits as a member of the judging panel for the multiple annual industry awards. Some of these awards are South African Sports Awards and the Sabre Africa Awards. I would like to welcome you all to the virtual stage. And ladies and gentlemen, in our manner for which you have been great the whole time, can I please see you give them a virtual round of applause? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Can we get the spotlight?
Hi, and thank you for having me. My name is Sarah Gooding, and I'm the MD of We Communications in South Africa. Today, I'll be talking about rethinking the purpose and meaning of leadership. I'll be sharing some insights from a recent global study we have conducted as an agency, and I'll be talking to two of my client partners, Microsoft and Fly Safair, regarding their experiences on this topic. I'd be very happy for you to share some thoughts in the chat and take some questions at the end. Let's start us off by thinking back collectively. We're living through a truly remarkable moment. Think back to the past year. We've all experienced profound upheaval, and change has touched our lives in many ways. What have you experienced personally as we think of these ideas of leadership and experience? How does this make you feel personally? What words come to mind? Have you perhaps been feeling more self-aware, weary, optimistic, determined? These are some of the qualities we've spoken to leaders about over the last year. To gauge the depth of this change, in January, We Communications surveyed more than 300 C-suite executives across the world. In conjunction with YouGov, we surveyed senior level managers and key decision makers spanning a variety of industries, including a mix of for-profit, non-profit, and government organizations. All are from companies with plus 100 employees, and all have leaders that have prioritized defining and articulating their organization's purpose. We wanted to understand, what does this upheaval look like in their own business? We wanted to understand their feelings. What has changed? What does this look like? How are they experiencing leadership in this remarkable, surprising, and challenging time? We know that in our own business, so much has changed. And as we speak to leaders and counsel them, as I'm sure many of you do on a daily basis, what has changed for them? We wanted to ground ourselves in this data. How are leaders experiencing this moment? What has changed for them? And what can we look forward to? What will be different? I'll go through some of our key findings with you now, discuss how you can integrate this insight into your own personal and brand leadership, and then we'll have a brief discussion with two of our We clients on how they personally handled it in this last year. We'll chat to EMEA Communications Director at Microsoft, Leo McKay, and CMO of airline Fly Safair, Kirby Gordon. We discovered that leadership is in the midst of a significant transformation. We found that leaders have traditionally been applauded and celebrated for their boldness and confidence, for pursuing a vision with relentless focus, and for never showing doubt or uncertainty. In fact, it's fair to say that we lived in a business world where to be vulnerable was to be weak. Well, this has all changed. I know we've all experienced this change, but let's get a little more specific with what this change looks like. What are the words that leaders are using? What are the platforms they're using? And how should leaders be showing up? Here's what we found. The last year has prompted deep introspection in leaders about their role in a changed world. 86% say they've become more introspective. By looking within, leaders are examining their own conscience and conviction with new levels of honesty and vulnerability. We hear it from leaders across the globe who are really starting to think of that vulnerable space and how it's affecting their leadership, the way they're thinking and talking about their role, the language they're using. Nearly 2/3 of the leaders that we surveyed have acknowledged the new ways how their actions reverberate throughout their organizations. Very interesting to us is that from this introspection comes a new mindset, new behaviors, and new ways to think, act, and lead in 2021 and into the future, all having emerged out of the pain, challenge, and introspection of the last year. Each of these is critically linked to the ways business and organizations show up and the impact that they have on the world around them. From tuning in and acting on employee concerns and aspirations to the need for leaders to go beyond traditional constituencies and engage a wider community of stakeholders than ever before. There are incredible ways that senior leaders are talking, the language they use, and their focus on consequence. What's really interesting to us is how we turn this into leading in new ways with the people we work with daily. This research delves into some of the attributes, behaviors, and how-tos that have emerged as leaders navigate these new waters. First off, giving voice to personal values is so critical. A vast majority, 71% in fact, say that articulating their own personal core values is more important than it was just a year ago. This is central to their evolving mindset in approaching the new environment. Business leaders can be a unifying force to help solve major socio-political issues. Business leaders are taking responsibility on much broader issues than their own organizations. Leaders are trying to be specific and prioritize the issues that they weigh in on. There are many CEOs working out ways to stand up in order to stand out and be bold on certain issues. Self-reflection is traditionally seen as a personal luxury, a moment to step away and focus inward. Today's environment, however, requires a new muscle, a more dynamic and constant state of self-awareness. So how do leaders go about this? The way that leaders are doing this is a three-part approach to activate a more constant state of introspection. Self-awareness, questioning themselves about how they're doing this, reflecting and being very clear and articulate on their own beliefs. And then more publicly, they're acknowledging and taking accountability of their own behavior, how these reverberate throughout and beyond their organization. They have the courage of their conviction to be bold about what they stand for and how this connects back to their business. We asked leaders globally, what are the most important leadership behaviors coming through? When it comes to weighing in on these issues that matter to their employees, customers, and broader communities, we discovered the method for this being listen, learn, and engage. Of a range of leadership behaviors rated by our respondents, stakeholder engagement is one of the most important for 2021 and beyond. How they talk, listen, engage, collaborate is crucial. The starting point of this being listening. Going one step further, 71% are putting more of their own focus on engaging and listening to ensure they are addressing relating to equality in the workplace. Because holding equality as a core value is a crucial part of building a good and successful business. 74% say being collaborative is more important to them than it was a year ago. Leaders also report that a broader circle of influence is playing a more significant role in their thinking than ever before. These are the issues that business leaders see as their responsibility to address. And there's no secret that this is without its challenge. That's where the social, global, political issues impact and provide opportunities with these challenges. They're talking issues of income inequality, climate change, social justice, gender inequality, education inequality. and a general struggle for human rights. In the wake of a year of significant change, the ongoing generational shift is making the public louder, more socially connected, and leading stakeholder voices to increase pressure. Bold action by companies on environmental issues and equality is expected by more important stakeholders, including investors and customers. Leaders must now be the face and voice on a wide range of issues in politics. Politics and economic uncertainty is increasingly volatile, and there's a need for a very clear brand voice at a moment's notice. Moving forward, 2021 and beyond, leaders expressed a mix of positive and negative emotions, anxiety and sadness, as well as optimism and hopefulness. But the most common response that we saw was determination. They want to know what they don't know. They want to be prepared to take on the complexity of our time, pairing clear-eyed understanding of the challenges with a firm resolve to make an impact. Coming out of this, they're finding a new strength. Ultimately, what is the most notable part of this survey is how it highlights the emergence of a new mindset among the world's top leaders. This mindset has been forged in the crucible of disruption, uncertainty, and tragedy. In response, business leaders have looked within, discovered a renewed sense of purpose, a new appreciation for listening and sensitivity, and a new determination to work for change through sustained and open engagement. A great example of this new mindset comes from Microsoft, a brand that has really been ahead of the curve in bold, purposeful leadership. So I'd like to bring on Microsoft EMEA Communications Director, Leo McKay, to discuss how he sees this new leadership coming to life. Hi, Leo. Microsoft has a significant presence through the Middle East and Africa with a lot of staff in many different countries. How did you go about supporting leadership as they communicated with their teams on how Microsoft was responding?
I think, Sarah, like so many companies, we were principally focused on the health and safety of our own employees. And then we'd moved to really focus on our customers and supporting our leaders engage with our customers. As you know, as a large technology manufacturer, in many ways, we were the first responders to the first responders in the areas of healthcare or government relations. And so as a communications organization, our focus has stayed there. I mean, as much as there has been a lot of activity from an external communications perspective, we really are focused internally as well. And that's put a lot of pressure on our leaders, on our managers, on our teams. And we also have to make sure that these teams are prioritizing their own personal safety, their mental well-being. We have a big focus on prioritizing the essentials. We're a big multinational organization. There's a lot of different rhythms from a corporate, a regional, and in-country level. And so we had to make sure that we were focusing on the right message being delivered in the right mediums. And I think, as said, as a big technology company, we were quite lucky in that regard. I mean, we had a lot of ways to get to our employees, be they, large video addresses from our CEOs, emails from regional or country leadership. We made extensive use of communities inside software like Microsoft Teams, but we had to make sure that all of this was prioritized, and that our employees knew that when they got an important message, it was something that was really going to make a difference in their day-to-day working.
Microsoft is taking a bold step on climate change. I know that We Communications has worked with Microsoft on the launch of your carbon reduction plan, going carbon neutral by 2030, and removing all historical carbon from the atmosphere by 2050. If we look specifically at Africa, what are the major drivers for purpose communications that you'd call out?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it feels like such a long time ago now. We made that climate change commitment just prior to the pandemic. And I think importantly, it's a huge global commitment from us. And we've continued to make announcements over the past 18 months on areas like carbon removal, but also water use, biodiversity, and just quite recently we gave our kind of 1-year update and how we were doing in achieving our goals. But as you say, I mean, that's for us as a global company. We also like to make some commitments and engagements in terms of our purpose in the markets that we operate in, and not just around the kind of global commitments we're making on climate change or diversity and inclusion, racial justice, accessibility, but in the communities that we work in. In Africa, for instance, I think a great deal of our investment and concentration is going in areas like upskilling and job creation. It's a huge challenge for the African continent, and I think we have to make sure, as a large technology company, that we're helping local businesses, local governments build for the jobs of the future. If I think just back over the past couple of weeks, we've made pretty large announcements in markets like South Africa, and one that we've just done, which is particularly exciting in Nigeria. We made an announcement with the Nigerian government, principally focused around 3 core things: the area of connectivity, of skilling, as I mentioned, and then digital transformation. For connectivity, I mean, it's absolutely pivotal. We've seen this throughout the pandemic. People needed to work from home. Children have needed it for adequate schooling. And, we're building through a technology called Microsoft Airband, which uses unused TV white spaces spectrum to broaden broadband to more rural areas, the markets, and we've identified some good areas in Nigeria. The second, around skilling, is working with local providers and working with local customers to make sure that we are providing for the jobs of the future. And then the last, around digital transformation, that there was 2 key things here. One is an area of combating corruption, which globally is such a ginormous issue. But the second was a project we have called AI for Cultural Heritage, where we will be using the technology of the future in artificial intelligence to preserve what's important for many of these cultures. And for Nigeria, that's around 3 indigenous languages. So, as you say, we have large global commitments, but we also have these kind of unique local agreements, which are very much aligned to our mission and values as a company in areas where we're uniquely positioned to help.
Some really fantastic and exciting work happening across the continent. Thanks so much, Leo. It's really been great to hear your thoughts and to share them here today with all of the APRA attendees. Another brand based in Africa, which found itself in a tricky position a year ago, is airline FlySafair. So with me now is We's client, FlySafair CMO, Kirby Gordon. Hi, Kirby, and thanks for joining us today. Kirby, your experience of the pandemic was obviously quite different at FlySafair compared to Microsoft. With flights grounded, staff kept at home, the business faced some really significant challenges. How did you work as a leadership team with the government, the wider industry, your employees to navigate that really challenging early period?
Absolutely, Sarah. I mean, I think it was very difficult, and as you say, entirely unprecedented. So there were a number of challenges that we had to face, and I think there were a couple of things that we really needed to pull together to do. I think for us, it was very important as leaders that we presented a united front, and that we were also able to be fairly decisive. We found very early on in the process that a lot of our stakeholders, both employees, customers, and of course even other members of the public, were seeking quite decisive answers from us at any given point. And naturally, we didn't have those, but it seemed key to us to take a particular stance and work forward from that. And then, of course, from that particular stance, also just embodying as much empathy as we possibly could, so that we took a holistic view on what everybody's position was and the way in which the pandemic was affecting them and their relative concerns.
On a positive note, you were one of the first airlines to bounce back as restrictions started to ease the back end of 2020. And you spoke about empathy. How did you take that an empathetic leadership approach and engage with your stakeholders across consumers and employees to reassure them that you were addressing all of their concerns?
Well, that was absolutely key, and we were fortunate in that regard to be able to get out of the starting blocks so early. I think what was important for us is, as I say, taking those decisive decisions. One of those particular decisions was that we wanted as an organization to band together, to not overreact and scale back, and to be poised and ready to be able to get out of the starting blocks as soon as possible, and to have the whole team at hand to do that. So that took us, really taking action, trying not to be sort of paralyzed and stunted by all that was going on. Ensuring that we had practical things in place, such as the protocols that we would need in order to be able to start flying, ensure that we had all of our sanitization elements in place, and that our crew and our staff were, equipped and on the same front with us when it came to actually enacting that. So a lot of what we did was working with them in terms of what their concerns would be, trying to understand how those concerns might either contrast or be the same as what our customers might be, and then work forward from that position to actually effectively put plans in place that would see us starting again. So that also created a lovely sort of positive attitude that, this is something that we would overcome, that we could work in spite of and despite of, and really get ourselves up and going again. In order to do that, it's I think the temptation is always to rely on the knowledge and the kind of view that might sit around the boardroom table, whereas realistically what we really had to do was step back and listen, and see how that same positivity that we were feeling, that same bullishness that we had in terms of getting over this, was something that would be relevant to the other stakeholders in the equation.
If you look at all this change, what would you say is the fundamental difference that you will implement in your leadership going forward?
I think, as with any kind of life incidents where you go through something relatively traumatic, I think what you ultimately end up doing is you arrive at a point of gratitude. I think one understands, how things can be and how things might be, and I think that also humbles you in quite profound ways. Particularly our business journey had been one that had been on a huge upward trajectory, no pun intended. We'd been going through a massive growth phase for the 6 years preceding that. And perhaps in some ways, you do become complacent. You do become somewhat sort of closed off to the outside world and to what the realities one faces could be. And so I think there's a humility that comes through what we've experienced that allows you to engage with people on a more real level and to see how, one can implement business decisions, which can sometimes be quite cold and quite practical, into a more human kind of interface.
Thank you, Kirby, and thank you again to Leo, and thank you all as an audience. As I wrap up, I'd like to leave you with a reminder of 4 key findings from our research, which you can take forward with you for your own leadership. Work to align your purpose and values and articulate them clearly. Listen to your stakeholders, internally and externally, with vulnerability. Broaden your influence by looking at the overlaps between what your stakeholders expect and what you can really do to bring about that change. And drive that change through sustained action. Create partnerships that bring about real change for the better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, team. I know that you are here. Was definitely a different approach to presenting. So I know you are here and you are keen to respond to any questions. So colleagues, I'm wondering if you do have any questions, you do have any comments, any builds. Doesn't have to be a question. You may just be building on something, that you heard. I know that Sarah only just summarized, but I think that one of the 3 things, that I picked out as an attribute of being a leader is to listen, to learn, and to engage. And then I think just before she wrapped up, she added a qualifier, which was listen with vulnerability. Sarah, would you just want to shed some light on what listening with vulnerability means?
Absolutely, Nkuru. I think you're spot on, and I think that was probably the overriding feature of the research and survey findings, is that we're just seeing such a massive shift from the traditional qualities that we've seen from leaders, and certainly what we've expected from C-suite leaders globally. So I think, you know, as we've experienced these trying times over the last year, and certainly moving forward, there's a greater degree of latitude in terms of our expectation, and vulnerability is absolutely key to show that degree of sensitivity, but really to listen to the audiences across questions.
Right. So I think, you know, sensitivity, listening with great sensitivity, I think would be my takeout, right?
Massively so. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. So Kirby, look, I think that one of the areas, you know, that I find needed to build trust quite quickly was the aviation sector, because everyone was like, what would travel be like? What are we going to do? What should we expect? What's going to happen? So I think maybe drawing from the Fly Safair example is, how can a leader, you know, rebuild trust? How can we rebuild trust? Over to you, Kirby.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've identified something that's incredibly key. I mean, what was quite unfortunate about being in aviation during the pandemic is that, you know, aviation and the spread of COVID-19 were kind of almost quite unfairly conflated as one and the same thing, because for so many of us, you know, the perception was that COVID arrived on our shores thanks to aircraft. And I've always been quite ardent to say that we need to remember aircraft don't spread COVID-19. It's actually people that, you know, happen to be relocating that spread COVID-19. And that was quite a key sort of understanding. But I think to answer your question more directly in terms of from a leadership perspective and leading as a brand, not just as leaders within our organization, there was a lot of need for us to, as Sarah said, listen very carefully, formulate an opinion, take a stance, and then stand by it. And I think often what really served us well in the long run was being quite proactive with that communication. So sharing out to the public and of course to our own teams, views, insights, stances, responses, whatever it is that we were going to do, in order to really take ownership of that message, of that methodology, of that responsibility, and put that out there into the public realm. And that I think served us very well.
And thanks. I also heard Sarah say that we're one of the quickest to recover. So great and well done. So Leo, I mean, I don't mean to ask you a hard question, but I mean, I'm finding, especially with the pandemic, that there is, you know, a lot of demand on corporates. And, you know, sometimes I'll lie in my car and I'm thinking, is this really a fair ask? But I'm finding like a brand like Microsoft, I think question one is, have you found, you know, incessant demands? And by that, I'm thinking that someone in a village somewhere who, you know, is suddenly quite unhappy, you know, that they have no access to perhaps even basics such as laptop, any technology, you know, that can facilitate conversations for them. Now, I'm conscious as an organization that you probably are also running, you know, organized corporate social responsibility, but are you finding that there is an extra demand on you, a brand like Microsoft, and how are you dealing with this sense of entitlement, wrongly or rightfully so? So over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say you're absolutely right. I'd say the role of not just Microsoft, but other, you know, large technology companies has really come front and center, not just over the past year of the pandemic, but I'd say over the past 4 or 5 years. I mean, we can't hide the fact that, you know, all the largest companies in the world are, you know, large technology companies. Our technology is enabling much of the industry kind of around the world. I mean, I think the expectation is that the percentage of GDP globally that is technology based now is about 5%. Over the next 10 years, it'll probably grow to 10%. But that number is actually really underestimating just how fundamental technology change is for all of the other industries, all of the other 90%. You know, be it aviation or manufacturing or healthcare. So, I mean, to come back to your question, I think a lot is asked of technology and technology companies, but I mean, that's a responsibility that we don't shy away from. I mean, it is what we do. It is, you know, why we, you know, have the principles and mission that we do. I mean, our mission is fundamentally around empowerment and empowering organizations and empowering people across the world, you know, to really achieve more and do their best. You know, we're a platform company that really only does well when our customers, our people succeed and do well. And so, you know, as you say, when it comes to, you know, something like a pandemic or something like, you know, a far-flung rural community that doesn't have the access to technology that maybe a more urban community does, you know, we take that on our shoulders. And I mean, I mentioned, you know, in the question, a project called Airband, which, you know, we actually pioneered quite a few years ago in Kenya. Where, you know, there's a lot of, you know, rural areas, rural schools that didn't have high-speed internet access, and there was a relatively, you know, simple way to solve that through technology, and that technology actually is fundamental to a lot of what we're doing in rural areas of the United States, because they you know, they have a similar issue with technology connectivity across their urban and rural. So. Yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot of responsibility placed on us, but I think it's a responsibility we understand, and it's a responsibility we accept.
Thanks for that response. So Patrick Achitab has got his hands up. Patrick, may you please take the floor and ask your questions directly?
Thank you very much. I listened quite keenly to the great presentations by the great speakers. Apparently, just to complement the conclusion of the presentations, I thought it wise to knit in a little bit of a model, an emerging model of leadership at present, which is considered to be the humane leadership, which concentrates much on the inspirational aspect, because it is said, and this is the question we should be asking ourselves, other than your title, why should anyone be led by you? And that is a very, very critical aspect. And as Sarah was presenting towards the very end, she brought in some greater qualities that determine and distinguish great leaders from basically the mediocre leaders. But just to add in a little bit, now we're talking of moving from command to inspiration as one of the greatest aspects. And this is one of the things that we lack most. And we also, the world is in desperate hunt for what we call exponential thinking leaders. These are leaders that have the capability to generate ideas, to practice patience as well, to get out of the comfort zone and to make exponential decisions. But high above all, there's need actually for leaders that have an overall perspective. You see, more than number can tell, we usually lost in our own perspective, regardless of the other things that basically affect the people we work with. And the leaders sometimes end up making erroneous decisions because of having a narrow, confined perspective of the world or what leadership is all about. And the last but one is basically embracing change. And I'm glad, I think it was it Kilbre, if not Leo, who was talking about the airline industry. I looked at the examples being given, but we've got even a perfect example being given in Africa pertaining to the Ethiopian Airlines. Because in the year 2019, when the Boeing 737 crashed and 149 people perished and 8 crew, no survived it at all, the CEO then was always ever available. He took drastic decisions. He knew that it was quite dangerous and people's lives were high, relatives were actually working. And it was not surprising that Tewode Gebremariam, the CEO, was in 2019 awarded basically the Executive of the Year in 2019. That's what we should learn about crisis leadership management. And it was not surprising as well that he was accorded the overall excellence for outstanding crisis leadership in 2020 by the Global Finance magazine. Those are the elements that we people in the communications should basically be in a position to learn and emulate and practice. And finally, the leadership calls upon people to lead with courage. Thank you very much. Those are the few comments from the home heart of Africa, Malawi. I thank you. God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Patrick for that comment around humane leadership. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for your valuable contributions, and we really do appreciate it. And it'd be great if you stayed on and also looked through the chats. There may be comments, questions or bills, for you. So thank you again, and best wishes.
Thank you for having us.
True pleasure. So ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being on. Thank you for being a great audience. We're going straight into the next session. You have been amazing, and I hope likewise you have been learning, because I have been learning, quite valuable things. I've got full notes. So it's so important that we just go through the last few sessions, really critical. The next person we've got here is going to be speaking to us about a bias towards inclusion, trends in marketing communication. And to share with us today will be Carol Watson. She's Chief Inclusion Officer for BCW Africa. I would like very quickly to read out her profile. If you could just give me, yes. So as BCW's Chief Inclusion and Equity, I beg your pardon, I'll step back. As BCW's Chief Inclusion, Equity and Diversity Officer, Carol has a deep understanding of the business approach to embedding inclusion and the metrics-driven practices of building and nurturing a truly inclusive organization. She believes in the relentless progress of inclusive organizational transformation in her work internally and as an external marketer, thought leader, and inclusion and diversity practitioner. She had worked, for Working Mother Media, prior to joining BCW, responsible for advising and consulting 200+ mid to large size organizational leaders at all levels at how to best leverage proven innovative diversity, and sustainable culture changes. A few of the projects she carried out was around R&D in communications, the impact of employee resource groups, and more. She co-founded the marketing and media industry initiative, Inclusive 100, with She Runs It. Now, this brings together the advertising, media, and marketing ecosystem to benchmark workforce, workplace, and inclusive culture progress, and share best practices with 30+ marketing organizations. She holds a master's in organizational development from Pepperdine University, as well as certifications in intercultural development, Mayer-Briggs Type Indicator, and coaching. Ladies and gentlemen, could you please welcome to the virtual floor, Carol Watson. Carol, I think we can see your presentation. If you just put it on presentation mode, you'll be good. The floor is yours.
Okay. Does that work? Can everyone see?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's quite an honor and really joyful to not only hear the conversations before, but to be present to so many fantastic discussions on this topic. So I'm going to build on a lot of what's been said already and pull it into what some of the still challenges are around some of this work as we're moving forward. So what has changed regarding marketing communications and really building an inclusion? A number of things have changed and will continue to change. We all know that the young adult population is growing massively, particularly on the continent, and social media and the use of social media has required quite a bit of immediacy in how not only organizations corporately and by brands are responding, but also looking at who are these audiences and how do we make sure that we're much more inclusive about them. They demand much more from corporations. There's much less patience to sit and wait, and they really want to make sure that corporations and the brands that they choose as consumers are held responsible for what they do, no matter where they are in the world, there is pure transparency and no borders now with social media. Most companies are really focused much more on equity. And unlike equality, equity is really digging into where are the inequities, where are the opportunities to provide what different diversity dimensions need in order to achieve pure equality. And that results in changing and fixing different perspectives and bringing light to whether it's health inequities, where it comes to justice, which we've seen very much in Black Lives Matter movement across the globe, and social inequities and sustainability. Corporate and brand reputation has become the private organizations' conversation around how are they showing up and how are they managing their reputation around all of these conversations. Crisis management is also now impacted because there are more situations around crisis management that involve different diversity dimensions. There may be communities that are more impacted, employees that come from underrepresented populations within the organization or in communities, and inclusion within crisis needs to be managed in a very different way. Stakeholder accountability, as I think we've heard a few times, is really increased, but in very many different ways. And the influence of stakeholders through social media and through the communities that are served has really changed the power dynamics around inclusion. So I wanted to pull apart, what do we mean by stakeholders? And what are the questions we should be asking now as we move forward? Over the last year, things have changed very much when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And it has become on the top of the radar because of all of the trends that we've seen so far. And so the questions that we're asking, not only of the C-suite and the boards that are present, boards of directors now are really expected to be much more diverse, and investors are asking companies, what is the board leadership? Their investors are asking about what is the demographics of all levels in organizations, and they want to see what the narrative is on what the actions and the commitments are. It's not enough to say that that these ideas are important, that diversity and inclusion is important and equity is important, but what are the actions and where are you holding yourselves accountable? So leaders need to find their voice there, which is the big challenge. It's not enough to want to be more inclusive and prioritize these pieces, but the tricky piece is finding your voice. And that's where the discomfort is, quite frankly. Employees are demanding much more from their employer, and the war for talent is definitely evident. And so how they pick and choose their employer is based on their values and what actions they're taking, what are they seeing. And so looking at everything on social media, whether it's employees sharing what is happening to what the company is sharing and the narrative that they're portraying about the advancement and how their employees have a seat at the table for a number of different decisions really impacts how the employees feel that the company is showing up around these topics. When it comes to marketing, it's become much more complex, and I'll talk a little bit more about how we're thinking about bias in the customer piece and how we need to think about those communities. But how are we adjusting our messaging to show greater empathy for key audiences and dividing those up? Supplier diversity. We know that in certain countries, it is much more sophisticated a program. In other countries, it may not be, but overall, companies are really looking at their vendors and their suppliers, whether it's their communications firms or their vendors that they're working with, to make sure that they're measuring and having metrics around that. and really considering who's doing the work, whether it's a producer, a director, or influencer, and really digging into that analysis. And in the communities that we serve. And so looking at those demographic communities, not as just who we're marketing to, but the influence and the stakeholders, and who do we speak, what do we speak out around, or some of the considerations and the different stakeholders that often leaders may not always be considering, that play a role in where bias might show up and where we can be much more intentionally inclusive. I think Sarah showed some great data on what CEOs are paying attention to, but it's only over the last few years, just even over the last year, has there been such a seismic shift in the priority of diversity, equity, and inclusion as a personal strategic priority for them. And it's only over the last few years that there's been a shift in publicly traded and private organizations playing a greater role in what they speak out around and what they speak to. And the complexity that comes with that is, what do we speak about and what do we stay silent on? And how do we support the different stakeholders, the employees in the community? And what do leaders, how do they find their voice? And where is the bias in their perspective on these issues? There's so many issues that they may not have alignment on, whether it's police reform or a political unrest, or some of the other issues. But it's come to the top of the conversation ladder, but now it requires more training and more support to find their voice in a more authentic way. So what are we doing in this work, and what are we seeing in terms of the communication solutions? What we're seeing is that brands and companies, whether they're marketing communications departments, are pulling apart their processes because we've all seen, as consumers and industry practitioners, outputs of communications and marketing where we're wondering, how did that happen? What happened in the process? How did that get missed in the process? And so we've been working very closely with companies to do bias interrupter workshops and training. Terms and language are constantly changing and have changed quite a bit over the last year. And so companies want to feel they need to be upskilled around what are the proper terms, what is the proper trends that we should be paying attention to? Is this the right nuance? Tone and nuance is really critical for all of the different diversity dimensions. And often the people that are doing the work may not have the skill and the lived experience to be able to understand what the right tone is and what the right nuance is. And so the leaders that really want to step up, as Sarah was mentioning, there is a greater push, but often they don't have that lived experience to understand how to navigate, and they can make missteps. That's where the bias might show up. It may be something in an image, the high context, particularly for people of color, the high context in communications often means that things are missed in tone, in language, in the imagery, and the authenticity of what's coming across. And so there is greater effort to make sure that there is much more skill wherever that work is done in whatever country. If it lands somewhere, there's an opportunity and a potential for a lot of crisis work that comes on the back end. And so the testing of messaging, the testing of images, the testing of approaches has increased, but really making sure that the questions, the sample sizes and the focus groups really represent very intentionally representative groups, auditing all of the communications messages to make sure that tone and messaging manages bias, whether it's the talent process and how we're recruiting to be much more open and inclusive across gender, across LGBTQ community, disability, nationality, ethnicity, religion. All of those things now need a finer magnifying glass to make sure that we're tweaking all of those messages, whether it's for the talent processes or corporate reputation, communities they serve, or even for investors. So there's much more research happening to make sure that we have a closer pulse on the demographic shifts that are happening and what the feeling and perceptions and expectations of those communities are. Because there's so many issues that companies want to speak out about, and because there's so many issues going on around the world, what we're seeing is that leaders and marketing communications teams are really struggling around what do we speak out around, who should be saying it, how do we support our employees, what do we say externally? And so we've been customizing decision trees and encouraging companies to come up with their own with the help of a very curated council of advisors internally and even externally to make sure they're getting that input so that the right people are sitting at the table regardless of level, so that they know what is the messaging, what do people expect, what are these different stakeholders, and really ironing out which stakeholders we need to make sure we give voice to. And then finally, one of the other trends is just upskilling staff and navigating bias. We talk about bias as something that we all need to get much more comfortable with. If you have a brain, you have bias. It is something that is natural. It comes with who we are as humans, and it can even lead you towards something, unintended attraction towards a person, a community, and a representation, or lead you away from something. And so getting comfortable within organizational cultures to talk up and to check bias and manage that, as well as building cultural competence, there are some of the key trends that we're seeing. We have a polycultural approach has been growing in interest, in particular, multi-dimensions of culture at play, not just race and ethnicity, but lifestyle and the cultural zeitgeist. So pulling apart through research and the risk assessments and analysis has really played a greater role in how we're advising clients to think differently about the diversity dimensions and really have a bias towards inclusion. While you can't just have an easy checklist, there are some established approaches and mindsets and questions that we encourage leaders and marketing communications clients to ask themselves, to ask each other as they're going through the process, whether it's the intake and the brief and really deciding on a creative, to also interrogating the work, interrogating the process, making sure that there's feedback and empowering others to have a voice to make sure that we're not missing out on other components. And then finally, just want to share how we're upskilling our teams across the globe in different regions. We're tackling bias now as we speak at this month. Actually, we're in week 4, and this is our second go around to really interrogate bias across all different dimensions and really look at the client work as well as the systemic pieces to bring awareness and to really create a voice around these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. Found the conversation particularly useful. I think even more so the very simple explanation that had me grinning behind the screen, which was if you have a brain, then you have a bias. Very simple and very, very factual. Look, I like the fact and the focus that you gave to cultural bias. I think only because, as communicators who are, talking to the public, your bias can show through even the work, that you do. I think here in South Africa, we've had 2 really crazy incidences over the past 2 years, where people who worked in the brand inadvertently let their biases come through in the way that, they put out the communication, and it seemed quite little, but out of it were riots, demonstrations, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that was you not dealing, you know, your inner challenge. So I like what you said about, you know, that cultural bias and then how to deal with it. I think just one question from my end. Are you going to be able to share the presentation with us? Because
yes, for sure.
I suppose
we'll send it.
Okay, cool stuff. Thank
towel.
you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, does anyone have any questions, any comments, any bills, anything, you know, she can take away? It is 54 countries on the continent, over 2,000 languages. We all do have, you know, different hang-ups, and that's why it's important for us to listen to the comments about inclusion so that everyone is, you know, included and we can bring a lot more to the table. So I see, thank you, Carol. This is from Joseph. Thank you, ma'am. This is from Balama. Thank you, Carol, especially the talk on bias. Thank you, Carol. This is from Asmao. So it's a lot of thanks to you for the session. Really appreciate. So I think it's thank you so much, Carol, and we hope that we do see you again and that you respond when we extend our invitations. From all of us, this is Efe Juliet, from all of us from across the continent, is thank you and very best wishes.
Thank you.
Cheers. Okay. Robin, were you wanting to, or did they just spotlight you?
No, I was actually trying to say something. You know, Carol is my colleague at BCW, and we work together on the destination inclusion work that showed you there. And I was going to just add to what she said about if you have a brain, you have bias. I think that the most important thing, I mean, I think that's absolutely true. Hello, Carol, how are you? You know, I think that's absolutely a true statement. And I think to take it one step further is that now that we've said it and we all know it, the thing to do now is to become aware of what our biases are and then to give the floor to other people so that they can talk as well. Because if we all become aware of our similarities and our differences, especially culturally, then we're going to do far better together in terms of the work that we create, whether it's internal comms or for our organizations, if we're part of corporate teams or as consultants, the work that we do for our clients is going to be much better if we're aware of our cultural similarities and differences and we take them into account in the work that we do. So it was all I just wanted to add. Thank you, Carol. Thanks, and you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Valuable comments, just leaning into the presentation that Carol has done. So thank you, both of you from BCW. We appreciate your contribution. Okay. Look, I think we would have a wrap up very quickly, but before we do that, we would like to put out a call for hosting APRA 2021. I remember 2 years ago when they did it, was it 2 years? And, you know, Nigeria was bidding and so was Ghana. And it was going to be Ghana. And as soon as it was announced, we just went into a jollof rice war. So I think that, look, there always is conversation about how we can elevate the conversations around PR. To use the president's word, he says PR needs PR. And you know, what better way to do this than for you to host the conference in your country? In the countries that we have hosted, we have connected to the ministers of information, we have connected to the association chairpersons, and what that does for you is it elevates the conversation. So this is the official call out. The official call out for you to please bid to host APRA 2022. Important to mention that the hosting is not at all done without the support of the ABLE Secretariat. So it would be you pitching to host. I've just highlighted one of the two conversations. It also is your opportunity to walk the talk about elevating the PR conversations up to a national level. Now, before I hand over to the person who will be wrapping up for the day, I would like to first thank everyone who has stayed on with us. It has been a very valuable session, and she will do, you know, the wrap-ups and the nuggets. So first of all is thank you. Second of all, I'd like to thank the people who have been working behind the scenes. This is one conference I've had where we haven't had, you know, a hectic breakdown from the control room. Is also to thank everyone in the Secretariat who has worked and partnered with various persons, you know, to make this a success. Chief Coordinator in the Secretariat and Executive Secretary of the program is Taiwo Tsunkarimo. So Taiwo, this is celebrating you and cheering you for the work that you do. I'm also celebrating Sukomi, celebrating everyone who has worked fastidiously behind the scenes. So is well done and thank you. Now I'm going to invite Sukomi Oguni. She's Associate Group Head Business, Innovation and Strategy at CMC Connect Limited. She is going to be wrapping up the day for us. So handing over to you, Sukomi.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Ankara Olumide-Ojo. I think you've been an amazing moderator so far. We've had the most amazing 2 days. So just to wrap things up, I just want to say a big thank you to all of the speakers, the panelists from day 1 actually down to day 2. It's been a very insightful period. I think first of all, today we've learned that it's very important for us to be very data-driven. As PR practitioners, the relevance of data to our work is huge in terms of building consumer trust. And then finally, especially for the session we just had from Carol Watson, I think it's also very important for us to try as much as possible to drive inclusion within our organizations, try as much as possible to also develop nuances, the right narratives and the right nuances that will show that our organizations is on the forefront of societal change. So yeah, I think we've had a very wonderful time so far. Thank you to all the participants and the speakers, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Please just add that the Sabre Awards is tomorrow. Please come dressed up, you know, to attend the awards. Also important to announce that we have got really exciting, we're wrapping up on a high. We have Jordan back tomorrow. We're having really exciting conversations and we will be keeping to time. So I think from here in Johannesburg, where it's 3:05, in Nigeria, where it must be 2 minutes past, it must be 5 minutes past 2, probably Morocco, where is 5 minutes past 1. And I think in East Africa, where it must be 5 minutes past 5. I'm, you know, priding myself that I know what the time is across the continent. It's very best wishes. Have a good rest of the day. And we look excitedly forward to hosting you tomorrow. Cheers and thank you.